Okay, so I would like to welcome Maureen and Wanda to this new class. It's the masculine, sacred masculine class that's following the Mars Synodic Cycle. We're beginning with a brand new archetype, so it's the perfect time to get started. It's the Aries God archetype, and we'll get into what that's about shortly. But for anybody who is seeing this recording later, I'd like to welcome you too, and I'm excited that you've found us and that you will be following along with this information. If through the course of this webinar, you decide that this is something that you're feeling really inspired to join and participate, there will be information on the last slide that I'll share regarding how you can find us and join us. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's class is October 24th, 2020. And we are with Mars in retrograde. The birth of the new archetype always takes place when Mars is in retrograde. And what's really interesting about this that I didn't realize before is that in my natal chart, I have Mars retrograde in Leo. So I was born actually just weeks before the birth of the new Leo archetype at that time. So that was kind of exciting to discover. So we have a huge agenda today.
Oh,
I know. As I said, this class is normally a 2-hour webinar. It's probably going to go into 2.5 hours today, simply because it's a whole new archetype that we've not dealt with before. And it's a whole kind of different synodic cycle. The Mars Synodic Cycle is very, very different from the Venus Synodic Cycle. And so we have to kind of all get up to speed and have the same foundational information to be able to carry forward with the rest of the classes during this Aries archetype. And that's why I'm taking a little bit more time in this first class to really help us get to that level playing field as we move forward. So yes, there's a lot that we're going to be going through today. Now, the first thing I'd like to do before we open sacred space is I would just really like to take this opportunity to recognize and acknowledge Daniel Giamario. And he and Kaylin Castell are the founders of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, which is a nonprofit which offers all kinds of classes through their school. And he is, as far as I understand, you can correct me, Maureen, if I've got this wrong. He is really the gentleman that downloaded, so to speak, this information about the sacred masculine and its relationship to the Mars Synodic Cycle. Is that correct?
yes, it is.
Yeah. And then Kaylin, did she work on this Mars cycle with him? Or was she strictly with the Venus cycle?
Venus cycle, and it was Eric Ross that works with Daniel Giamario on the Mars.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Daniel Giamario and Eric Ross on the Mars Synodic cycle, and then Kaylin Castell and Tammy Brunk have an organization called Venus Alchemy.
Yes.
And they work on the Venus Synodic Cycle. And so all of the work that I am doing with these cycles is grounded in their work. Also, many of the principles of shamanic astrology, which Daniel and Kaylin, again, downloaded or discovered or shared with us. And then also a lot of my work ties into the law of abundance principles. And my favorite law of abundance teacher is Esther Hicks and Abraham. So I incorporate shamanic astrology principles and law of abundance principles in my work. So when you follow my work, it'll look very different from Daniel's and Kaylin's. And that's okay, because we all have a unique vision and perspective to contribute. And yet I'm very, very grateful to Daniel, Eric, Kaylin, and Tammy for their contributions, because without it, my work would not have evolved in this way. So just want to give a shout out to them. Would you like to say anything about them, Maureen?
No, I've only taken a couple of seminars with Daniel, but I really admire him for the work he's done in this area. And he wrote a book about that download that he received and how that happened, if anybody's interested. And he had a particular place where he went, and it was called the Grandfather Rock. And that is where he received his inspiration for the work he does.
Oh, I'm so happy you shared that, Maureen, because I didn't even know that piece of the story. So
Yeah.
that's really beautiful. And is he in Sedona where Kaylin is, or is he somewhere
No,
else?
he lives in the Philippines now.
Okay,
Mhm.
excellent. All right. So thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Kaylin. Okay, so we always start our sessions with an invocation. And today's invocation is going to be to, some people pronounce this Nagendra, some people pronounce it Nagendra. And so this is who we're going to be invoking today. Here are some pictures of some sacred statues that depict Nagendra. And you see that Nagendra has kind of the hooded serpent head here, which has been affiliated with dragon lore as well. And you'll see where that comes in. This video that I found, which will do the chanting, is 4 minutes long. I'm not going to play the whole 4 minutes. We'll just do a couple of minutes of it. But the first verse of it, these are the Sanskrit words of the first verse. And this is the meaning of that particular verse so that you can kind of get a feel for this energy that we're invoking. And so I have my candle ready. I don't know if you've got your candle ready. If you want to smudge yourself or use your sprays, I use sprays that are created by Amanda Ellis. Her guide is Archangel Metatron, and I love her spray, so I use those. So I'm going to use that. Okay, here we go.
Shivaya Gauri Vadanabja Vrinda Suryaya Darshadvara Nashakaya Shrinilakantaya Vrishadvajaya Tasmai Shikaraya Namah Shivaya.
So I'll go ahead and pause it there. So how did you like that, Maureen? I mean, to me, that is just so incredibly powerful.
It's beautiful. Yes, I loved it.
Yeah. How about you, Wanda? I'm sorry, go ahead. Go
No,
ahead,
I was just going to say that I'm new to chanting,
Oh,
and it's going to be good to explore that area and maybe apply it in my spiritual work.
right. Good. And since we just completed the throat chakra activation in the Venus journey, this is a really great time to start incorporating the chanting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
How about you, Wanda? Do you have anything you'd like to share? Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I find it very calming. It's very soothing. I love that type of music. Yeah, very calming.
Good. So this is a different kind of invocation that we've done before in our Venus classes, but I just loved it. And I just thought we would, since this is a new archetype and a new synodic cycle, we'd start with a new kind of invocation.
Beautiful.
Oops, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. I'm trying to, there we go. Okay, here we are. So the Aries Mars Synodic Cycle, it actually began on October 13th. Today is October 24th. And that October 13th day is super, super powerful for many reasons. One of them is not only was this Aries Mars archetype being birthed on October 13th, but Venus in her descent journey also had her heart gate activation on the same day, which is why I've got this beautiful image here of Yeshua and Magdalene, to have both of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine have an activation on the same day. I would love to know how often something like this happens. We already know that they're only in the underworld together every 34 years, or was it 32 years? I don't remember.
32, I think.
Excuse me?
32, I think.
32 years. So we know it's a rare occasion. And if that wasn't enough, then Mercury went retrograde in Scorpio on the same day. What's really super spectacular about that is we know that Mercury is the cosmic messenger. And so with the two of them having these powerful activations on October 13th, there's definitely a message that they're desiring for humanity to receive. And of course, I'm just getting goosebumps all over. Mercury as the cosmic messenger is playing a significant role in helping us to receive that message from them. The other thing that's pretty groovy about Mercury going retrograde in Scorpio is many people know that Aries is the god, that Mars is the god of Aries. Fewer people know, however, that Mars is the ancient god of Scorpio. So we're going to be seeing this Scorpio energy kind of weaving through this Mars synodic cycle, especially right here in this phase of it. So you can see down here that on October 13th, Mercury stationed retrograde at 11 degrees, almost 12 degrees of Scorpio. And then, isn't this interesting? This really took me by surprise. It stations direct on November 3rd, election day. And look at where it's stationing direct. 25, almost 26 degrees of Libra, the sign of conscious equal partnership. So while some people may be on pins and needles, maybe even possibly feeling hopeless and helpless, I think that this is a sign that there could be some unexpected outcomes that would be very positive for us, whether we can perceive them or not.
Good.
Would you like to share anything about that, Maureen or Wanda?
No, I think that's amazing. Just
Yeah.
absolutely.
How about you, Wanda?
No, I have nothing to share. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, oops, got ahead of myself. So this is really incredible too. At the same time that we're having the birth of this new Mars archetype, this Aries archetype, right before it, we had a Mars square Pluto event. Remember, Pluto is the god of Scorpio, right? Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. And this year in 2020, we're having 3 Mars square Pluto events, which is also a rare occurrence. I think that it's usual to have 1 or 2 Mars square Pluto events, and it's rare to have 3 Mars square Pluto events. Now, the first square was in August, and the third square will be 2 days after the winter solstice on December 23rd. But let's look at where this second square took place in relationship to the birth of this archetype, which we know happened on October 13th. It was October 9th. So just 4 days before the birth of this archetype. Now, what was very personal for me during this time, and we remember talking privately, that this was a very powerful time. The day before the Mars square Pluto event was the day, October 8th, where I took a picture of Mars in the sky, and that image showed up in the photograph that I sent you guys, and we were talking about how we thought it might be one of the Draconid meteors, and I'm going to show that later. So that was kind of a really powerful manifestation of these energies. And then the day after, I had this phenomenal encounter with this gold eagle that showed up here. And I've lived here about 4 years, and I've never seen a golden eagle here. And so that encounter, which I'll talk more about later too, happened 3 days before the birth of the archetype. And just to clarify that the birth of the archetype happens whenever Mars is retrograde and is standing across the sky from the sun. That Mars-Sun opposition is always the birth of the new archetype. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this is that in ancient Egypt, the eagle represents the sun. So very much a kind of a, these shout outs that I was receiving from the cosmos about the power of these Mars square Pluto events and this upcoming birth of the Mars archetype. I follow Marcia Wade. She's known as Star Sister Astrology. I don't know if either of you are familiar with her. And she wrote an article on this Mars retrograde and period. And this is something that she mentioned that I thought was really, really powerful. This statement was specifically towards the Mars square Pluto. Her article was on the Mars retrograde and the Mars square Pluto. And she wrote, the alchemy of metamorphosis occurring in your life is accelerated. And so this is really an exciting time to know that that's what's happening through the Mars square Pluto events, and that that's what's happening on a grander scale through the Venus heart activation and the birth of the archetype, Mars archetype, happening on the same day. And so, we have done work together in our Venus classes where we've looked at the energies of the planets and the astrological signs, and we've pulled out keywords that represent those frequencies. And I'd just like to take the opportunity now, looking at this statement and a couple of other statements that she has, that I put in here, when you look at this phrase, the alchemy of metamorphosis occurring in your life is accelerated. You know, which of these keywords are related to Mars and which of these keywords are related to Pluto? Wanda, do you have any idea which of these would relate to Mars or Pluto? How about you, Maureen?
Well, alchemy is Pluto, transformation.
Yes.
So metamorphosis is Mars then, isn't it? Or is that Pluto also?
It's Pluto also, because
Oh,
metamorphosis has to do with regeneration. And remember, regeneration is a Pluto energy. And there is a word in here that's related to Mars.
accelerated.
Accelerated, yeah. Isn't that a beautiful way of taking the key words from that and blending them together to describe this square? And we know from our past classes, and those of you that are new to this work and are not familiar with astrology, in my first two Venus classes, which you can go back to the Sacred Feminine library to see, we talk about the definitions of these astrological aspects, one of them being the square. A square is an opportunity for a breakthrough in consciousness. So isn't this a beautiful way that she's blended all of those energies together with that aspect?
Yes.
So I mentioned before that Mars is the god of Aries and that he's the ancient god of Scorpio and that Pluto is the god of Scorpio. And what's really groovy is many people know that there are 3 symbols related to Scorpio, but I actually found an article, which I've shared down here and will be on the resource page, regarding 7 symbols related to Scorpio. And one of those symbols includes the eagle. The 3 symbols that we know about, do you want to share those, Maureen? The 3 symbols of Scorpio?
Oh no, I've gone a blank. Sorry.
Okay. So we have Scorpio.
Scorpion.
Scorpion. Thank you, Scorpion. And the next one is Eagle. And then the next one
Oh,
is,
that's what you just said.
and
Okay.
the next one is Phoenix.
Oh, Phoenix. Yes. Okay.
Right, the Phoenix rising from the ashes. And in some traditions, they will put the eagle and the Phoenix together. So, you know, the fact that I had that encounter with the golden eagle, again, bringing forth all of that Pluto energy and the birth of the new archetype was just really a beautiful expression of all of this happening in my day-to-day life. So here's something else that Marcia says about the Mars-Pluto square. She says it is leveraging the metamorphic power within you. So looking at those phrases, can you pick out anything related to the square, relating to the Mars or the Pluto energy? And for those of you that are watching this for the first time, these are students of mine that I've been working with and we've been practicing this. So this is an opportunity for them to practice.
Yes.
You're doing great. You're doing great. I'm so proud of you.
This is not my thing. You know that.
It is your thing. You're getting the hang of it. You're doing great.
Okay.
So which words would you like to pick out?
For Mars, the square.
Well, power would definitely be one, I would think.
So power can be for Mars as well. Yes, because with Mars, we've got that life force energy that is that life impulse that gets things activated. So yes, Power is a good one.
I would think leveraging would be one as well.
Leveraging could be a good one for Mars. And also leveraging is a good one for the square aspect, because remember we said squares are opportunities for breakthroughs. And so leveraging something is really taking you to the next level, which is a kind of a breakthrough, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the old standby here for Pluto is metamorphic, right? We saw it up here as metamorphosis and metamorphic. And power is a good one for Scorpio too, because Scorpio is all about the death and rebirth process, which has to do with, you know, empowerment as well. So then here's one more statement that she made, and this is specific to the Mars retrograde. That's what that little R is, means retrograde. She says, Mars retrograde is looking for something you need to break new ground for the life force within you. So which words are popping out at you here?
Break.
Yep.
Life force.
Yep.
I would think looking for some reason. I'm drawn to looking.
Yes, yes. And actually this entire phrase, Wanda, that you're drawn to, looking for something you need to break new ground. That's very indicative of what a retrograde cycle opportunity is providing you. Looking for something that you need, right? So that you can break through, again, that whole square thing. And for the life force within you. Again, life force can relate to Aries, to Aries, Mars, as well as to Pluto and Scorpio.
Scorpio, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I love her work. It's just, you know, you're so used to my work. It's nice to bring something else in and see how other people are finding those keywords inspired to blend them together to share their own messages about them. So let's look a little bit more at the Scorpio golden eagle. Can you believe that this bird landed in my backyard? I mean, and it was raining here and it was landed on the ground because apparently they're the largest bird in North America, and they cannot fly when it's raining because of the weight of the rain in their feathers. So they have to be grounded. So after he was there and the rain had stopped, then the sun came out, and he was sitting there like this with his wings spread in the sun, drying out his feathers. It's one of the most magnificent experiences I've had.
I couldn't think so,
Yeah. So we see here that the eagle is a higher expression of Scorpio power, and that their ability to fly brings greater clarity and bridges the theme of destruction and renewal as a story of evolution. That destruction and renewal, evolution, those are Scorpio energies, Scorpio keywords. So the eagle represents clear vision, intelligence, power, majesty, and freedom. And again, for those who are joining us, I'm very connected with shamanic medicine and animal totems. So I often throw that information in as well. So getting back to the Scorpio side of this, the eagle will transmute. This is what a Scorpio energy is about, transmutation. Their intense emotions, deep dive into Scorpio, right? Into a driving force for success and higher wisdom. They don't need to prove anything to anyone. And all they need to know is that it has succeeded for itself, that it is won for itself, and it does so with grace. And then I love this quote here, which I think is a beautiful representation about the birth of this new sacred masculine Aries archetype. When this creature appeared to you, and remember, this happened the day after the Mars square Pluto, the second Mars square Pluto for me, 3 days before the birth of this archetype, it is a sign of an end and a new beginning. I mean, isn't that phenomenal?
Yes.
It not necessarily means that someone will die. It can be in a form of saying goodbye to the old phase of your life and starting anew. And so the way that I interpreted was it was a goodbye to the old Mars archetype, the Aquarius archetype, and a hello to this new Aries archetype. And on a different level, what you're going to see later, that this Aries archetype that we're looking at, the fierce protector, is the Aquarian archetype for Aries. The old Piscean archetype was the rugged individualist. So we're also saying goodbye to the old Piscean archetype for Aries, and we're saying hello and starting new with the new Aquarian archetype for Aries. Is there any insights or questions that either of you have regarding this?
I wonder what the significance is that Venus has gone through her Aries archetype. She's moved through her cycle in the Aries archetype. And now Mars is going into the archetype as well. Well, this, well, it can't help, right? But somehow affect both Venus and Mars archetypes in some way. There must be some joining there. How would that look, do you think?
I agree with you. I agree with you. And the information that I'm receiving right now is that we know that all things, all life, all creation is birthed from the sacred feminine.
Mhm.
And so it makes sense to me that she would birth the upgraded frequencies of the Aries Aquarian archetype, and that then the sacred masculine, who is here to serve and support the sacred feminine, would then come in and receive those energies. How is that resonating with you, Maureen?
Yeah. Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. How about you, Wanda? Any thoughts on that? Okay, any other questions on that, Maureen?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, so this gets into that photograph that we're gonna see that I took, and Wanda's brilliant reminder that the draconic meteor showers were going on at the time that I took the picture, October 8th, which was, I think, the height of the meteor, draconic meteor shower time. And it turns out, I'm gonna put on my glasses because I'm having a challenge reading here. Turns out that the dragon, which is the symbol of the Draco constellation and the draconic meteors, is a mythical creature of Aries, which I did not know. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I found this information here. It says it makes sense that the first sign of the zodiac would contain the raw and instinctual power of a dragon. And Maureen and I have been talking a lot about the dragon energy that we've been tapping into. And Wanda, I don't know if you remember when I was going through my shamanic priestess training, I was really tapped into the dragon energy at that time. With mighty wings, deadly jowls, and the breath of fire, an Aries won't hesitate to go after their desires with fierce intensity. And so you can see here why Mars is a ruler of Aries and also an ancient ruler of Scorpio, because that fierce intensity is deeply embedded in the frequencies of both of those energies, aren't they? They put
Yes.
their entire selves into every move. Their power is both feared and admired by all who stand beneath it. So this is just another, getting back to that picture that we're going to see, another aha moment of how the synchronicity of all of this was coming together during those 3 days, the day of, the day before, the day after the second Pluto squares Mars. And here are some dragon gods.
Oh,
We haven't looked at any of the masculine gods before. So I thought, well, since the dragon is a symbol of Aries, let's look at some dragon gods. And so here are some from various cultures through the years. And you'll see here, over here, bottom left, there is Nagendra. And that's who we invoked today for this class. Pretty cool, huh?
it is wonderful.
Mesopotamia, Babylonia, Sumerian. Here's Quetzalcoatl from the Olmec culture. And there, I've noticed too, as I was looking into the work, that there is this bridge between snakes, lizard, dragons. They kind of blend together in terms of being considered dragon gods.
Yeah.
So here's the Draco constellation. And I can't thank you enough again, Wanda, for bringing this to my attention with those meteors. So here's where it's located. It's located near the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. And what's really phenomenal about this particular constellation is how large it is. Remember that the zodiacal wheel is 360 degrees, and Draco as a constellation spans 250 of those 360 degrees. And it spans from the sign of Aries all the way to Sagittarius. Incredible, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. And it's this ancient constellation which represents nearly every dragon mentioned in history. And the most famous story involving Draco tells that he was the dragon that Hercules had to defeat in order to possess the golden apples of Hesperides. Now, this is important because you're going to see that with the Mars Synodic Cycle, it's very much aligned with the hero's journey. And one of the most commonly known hero myths that follows that hero's journey is Hercules. So again, all of the synchronicities coming together. The golden apples of Hesperides, this word golden kept coming up time and time again. And so we're going to take a look at what the significance of these golden apples mean in just a few moments. Draco is also regarded as the dragon who guarded the golden fleece. That word golden, golden eagle, golden apples, golden fleece keeps coming up. And the dragon that the goddess Athena defeated when the Olympian gods fought the Titans. Athena grabbed the dragon's tail and threw it into the sky, where it became twisted around the northern pole of the sky. And let's see here. Okay. It never sets below the northern horizon. So that's the information about the Draco constellation. I mean, I just find this fascinating. How about you?
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And how it's all going to tie into this journey. So here we go. The golden apples of Hesperides. Here's a painting of the Garden of Hesperides. And those, the Hesperides are these three girls here. And you can see back here the tree with the golden apples. Let's see, the Hesperides are actually symbols of the gifts that the apple embody. And let's see here, the Garden of the Hesperides, where these three girls are, and they are a triad, like the three graces and the three fates from other Greek triads, is the goddess Hera's orchard. And in her garden, there is either a single apple tree or a grove that produces golden apples. And according to the legend, when the marriage of Zeus and Hera took place, the different deities came with nuptial presents for them. And among them, the goddess of Gaia, with branches having golden apples growing on them as a wedding gift. And Hera, greatly admiring them, begged Gaia to plant them in her gardens, which extend as far as Mount Atlas. So that's where this idea of the Garden of Hesperides came from. Now, the Hesperides were given the task of tending to the grove, but occasionally picked the apples from it themselves. Not trusting the Hesperides, Hera also placed in the garden an immortal, never sleeping, 100-headed dragon. These things are tying together, dragon and the golden apples, as an additional safeguard. And remember that in the myth of the judgment of Paris, it was from the garden, from this garden, that Eris, the goddess of discord, who we've changed her name, we'll talk about that later, obtained the apple of discord, which led to the Trojan War. So these apples have a lot of symbolism in these myths for the gods and goddesses. And here you can see a beautiful mosaic that is 3rd century AD in Roman, that is a mosaic of Hercules and the laborers here stealing golden apples from the Garden of the Hesperides. Isn't that beautiful?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to say about the apples, the golden apples?
No.
Okay. So a little bit more on the symbolism. Notice here that we have a picture of the Virgin, and what's back here? A plate of golden apples. And here is a picture of Venus, and what does she have in her hand? The golden apple. And so this symbology is really, really significant for us to understand. We know that the golden apple is an element that appears in various national and ethnic folk legends or fairy tales. Recurring themes depict a hero retrieving the golden apples that were hidden or stolen by a monstrous antagonist. The golden apple is associated with knowledge and is an allusion to revelatory states described by some shamans. So here we're getting kind of this link back to the Scorpio energies, because we know that Scorpio is the sign of the shaman, the shamaness, and that these revelatory states that you can achieve as a shaman are a part of that Scorpio energy. Now, in the Old Testament, the apple, of course, signified the fall of man, but in the New Testament, it's an emblem of the redemption from the fall. And that's why we see this apple over here with the Madonna and the infant, because it is in this image, these golden apples are a sign of that redemption. And I think in the Aquarian age, we think of that redemption as a kind of maybe even a starting place or synonymous with the ascension journey. What would you say about that?
Nothing.
Okay, so we've got these phrases: the apple of your eye, which represents an object or a person who is greatly valued. Apples are in the love songs of the Song of Solomon, being used in a very sensual context, and it's also used as a symbol for beauty. Well, Venus is the goddess of beauty, and so it's no surprise that we see a golden apple there. She's also the goddess of love. So again, no surprise that we see that there. And here's the picture. So the picture that we've been talking about. So this is a picture that I found of the Draconid meteor and what it looks like when it streaks across the sky. And this is my picture. That's Mars. And then there's that streak. And remember, I said when I took the picture, I couldn't see that, and I didn't see anything else in the sky. And I was questioning, could this be a meteor or not? Although we kind of landed on the fact that we thought it was a meteor. But I felt really much more confident in that when I found out that when this Draconid meteor shower is going on, it's happening when there's a waning gibbous moon. And because the waning gibbous moon has 75% of its face illuminated, the light of the moon washes out all but the brightest meteors, which is why you don't see all of them.
Mhm.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yes, it is.
And now,
Yeah.
see, this one looks straight to me, like it's going, pshoo, right? But look at the one in my picture. What does it remind you of?
A serpent.
It does, a serpent or the dragon's tail, doesn't it?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so that was the day before the second Mars-Pluto square. And the day after was the golden eagle. And all of this was, you know, within a very short window, 3 days before the birth of the new archetype. Isn't that spectacular?
Yes, it is.
So I spent a lot of time on this because I want people to understand that the cosmos is constantly communicating with us, constantly sending us messages, constantly sending us evidence that is often overlooked as a coincidence or a synchronicity, and certainly has much, much deeper meaning for us. Is there anything you'd like to share, Maureen or Wanda, about all of that?
I just know that I've been really drawn to dragon energy and added to my crystal collection a dragon and a carved dragon, and I'm really excited to be going forward with dragons. You know, I only knew the legend of Saint George in the dragon,
Mm-hmm.
but I like to explore legends and myths. So that's going to be real interesting.
Yes, yes. And for those people that aren't familiar with shamanic astrology, it's really based in these archetypes and the legends and the myths, isn't it?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
why we do so much work around them. Yeah. Wanda, any thing you'd like to share about your connection or not with dragons?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about the hero's myth, because this is really the foundation for the Mars Synodic Cycle. And little boys probably grow up being very familiar with this myth. Little girls, probably not as much. They're probably more related to it, at least girls my age, in terms of the one that's being guarded by the dragon and is being rescued by the hero, right? So we're shifting the story here. But here are some of the hero myths that people may be familiar with. Of course, Hercules, Achilles, the hero in the Trojan War, Arjuna of the Mahabharata, and King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. So these are some, I think, pretty well-known ones that men or women may be familiar with, and coming from different cultures as well. All right.
Look at King Arthur's shirt.
Yes.
I never did that before.
What do you see?
Scales.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting? Yes. I know. And so what's really interesting is that there are much older hero myths than these, and I've got a list of them here. But these hero myths have been a part of humanity for thousands and thousands of years, being, you know, passed down through the ages. So if you're familiar with Arjuna, you may also be familiar with Hanuman in the Ramayana. Gilgamesh is one of the heroes in a Mesopotamian mythology known as Epic of Gilgamesh. It was written in the late 2nd millennium BC, that poem. The Norse god Thor. Now, some more people might be familiar with Thor now from Germanic mythology, because the Marvel Studios has a film series in which Thor is one of the characters. And then from Roman mythology, Romulus and Remus, which have kind of had a little rebirth in our awareness because they're characters in the modern Harry Potter novels. So we see how they keep coming back and coming back and coming back. But I love this little quote here from Joshua Mark about Hercules. And it's interesting because in our work with the Mars Synodic Cycle, Hercules is one of the asteroids that we're going to be looking at in our charts. So having more information on him is really good to have. So it says here that an interesting aspect of Hercules' character is that because of his divine strength and abilities, he did not have to willingly submit to any of the labors or punishments imposed upon him. That's significant because you're going to find out in the hero's journey that there's this call that is often kind of declined at first. And so then they have to take the journey. But because he didn't have to willingly submit to it and he did it anyway, that's something that's very unique to him as a hero. He chose to suffer indignities such as his famous 12 labors or his servitude to the queen, and he did so willingly. His inner strength and ability to endure the hardships made him an inspirational figure to people and a symbol of stability in the midst of chaos, even if it was a chaos that he himself had caused, which most of his 12 labors were related to. They were the result of chaos that he had caused. So this hero's myth is an integral part of the Mars Synodic Cycle. And then the myth is developed by the hero's journey. And before we get into the hero's journey, let's just look at some of the asteroids that are some of these heroic figures. So Hercules, who we will be following, is considered a hero. Yeshua, who we have been following in the Sacred Feminine classes. I mean, the story of Jesus, that is definitely a heroic myth, whether you believe it to be literally true or not. Achilles, again, is an asteroid. The Arjuna hero is actually a group of asteroids that was named after him. There's 4 of them in that group. And what's interesting about that is that one of those 4 asteroids, Atria, is known as a Venus crosser. And it has been a companion to Venus for the last 7,000 years. Isn't that spectacular? And then we have Arthur. And I added in Merlin. We didn't talk about Merlin earlier, but I added in Merlin because of the Scorpio energy, right? That shamanic energy, that alchemical energy, that energy of magic. So that, I feel like Merlin represents that Scorpio energy there.
Yes.
If you hear the asteroid numbers, the ones that we're going to be looking at are Hercules, Arthur, and Merlin. We always include Yeshua. So if you're interested in Achilles or these Arjuna asteroids, the numbers are there, so you can go and look at them in your chart if you want to see where they are, even where they show up in your chart. And so here is the hero's journey. Now, this is a 5-minute video, and we're going to take the time to watch it because it's really significant as a foundational learning piece for this particular sacred masculine Mars Synodic cycle.
Oh, hey guys. Thought Monkey here. Sorry about that. I just got done watching one of my favorite movies, Star Wars, Episode 3. While watching it, I couldn't help but be drawn into the movie, especially into Luke Skywalker's story. It reminded me a lot of many heroic stories that I've heard before. That's because his journey in Star Wars has been modeled after the same heroic journey that humans have been recounting for thousands of years. This is what some call the hero's journey. Others call this the monomyth. The idea of the hero's journey was first brought to light by Joseph Campbell in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. This heroic journey is described by Campbell as when a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. This common journey can be seen in the stories told of the Buddha, along with Christ and Moses. The flow of the hero's journey is broken up into 3 main parts: the departure, initiation, and return. In the hero's departure, an ordinary person is living a normal life when all of a sudden the hero receives a call to adventure. Who, reluctant at first, is aided by a mentor figure and heads out on a mystical adventure. In Harry Potter, this can be seen when Harry is first contacted by Hagrid and initially states, "I can't be a wizard, I'm just Harry." With the help of Hagrid, Harry is eventually initiated into the world of wizardry, which leads us to our next stage, the initiation. Initiation refers to the hero entering his or her new world, where she or he faces new dangers, tasks, and challenges. The hero may be alone or have companions that help. At this time, the hero faces many setbacks and at times death. Eventually, the hero survives and earns some kind of reward for accomplishing his or her goal. In another well-known movie, Shrek enters the initiation phase when he and his companion Donkey embark on his quest to rescue Princess Fiona. Shrek faces some extreme challenges, such as rescuing Donkey from the lake of lava and rescuing Fiona from a dragon. When Shrek hands over Fiona, he gets his reward when the king gives him his deed to his swan. The last phase of the hero's journey is the return. At this stage, the hero returns to his or her world with the reward that he or she was given. The hero at this point has been transformed by the adventure and gains wisdom and spiritual power over both his or her original world and the mystical world that she or he was initiated into. In The Lion King, this is represented when Simba returns to his land to fight Scar. When Scar is insulted by Sarabi, Scar strikes her. Simba then steps forward to defend her and accepts responsibility for his father's death, even though it was an accident. Eventually, Simba defeats Scar and he sheds the guilt of his father's death. After Scar's death, life returns to Pride Rock and Simba becomes king alongside Nala, his new queen. The hero's journey can be found anywhere where stories are. Campbell would even argue that the hero's journey is inside of you and me, that it is a human element hardwired deep into our consciousness. Maybe that is why the books I love most and the movies I find myself watching over and over again always have a hero that goes on an adventure, faces obstacles and challenges, and returns home transformed. It is a story of innocence transformed into maturity. Well, it's time to get back to Star Wars. Thank you for watching, and please click the link.
Okay, so Maureen, can you think of a fairly recent experience that we've shared that relates to the hero's journey?
Let me think. Yes, France.
France.
The entire journey. We went through it rather quickly.
We did. And for myself, the way, so for everybody else that's listening that's not familiar with France, Maureen and I took a trip in September 2019 to southern France, and it was a Magdalene journey. And we were in the heart of the Templar country, where the Magdalene was. And we happened to be there when both Venus and Mars were in the underworld. And it was the Inanna underworld phase for Venus. And it was definitely what I would call the initiation phase of the 3 phases from Campbell's hero's journey. Wouldn't you say?
It was most, yes, but I would
Yes.
say it was also a departure.
Yes, our
Because
departure.
it was so unexpected what we experienced.
Yes. So we left our homes all across the world, right? The 7
Yes.
of us, different places in the US and Australia. That was the departure. We all met in, what was the name of the town that we met in? Toulouse, wasn't it? Toulouse.
It was, yes, Toulouse.
We all met at the airport in Toulouse. We got onto that bus together. We had no clue what we were in for, did we?
We did not.
But
No.
within what, 2 or 3 days, it became apparent that we had departed from the ordinary world and had become initiated into this trial and tribulation, right?
It was incredible. Yes.
Yes. And then the return. So we come home and we didn't realize that we had received all these gifts, magic, knowledge. And what came out of that trip? What came out of that initiation?
I'm still integrating. I'm still integrating it all. Yeah.
Well, the one thing that came out of it, that you were very instrumental in getting off the ground, was
Your
first,
teaching. Yes, your teaching. Absolutely.
first the sacred feminine classes,
Mhm.
and now the sacred masculine classes.
Yeah.
So here's where you can take the
Definitely.
period of a 1-year time span, and we have gone through in 1 year the 3 phases of this, what I would call heroine's journey.
Yes, it was the heroine's journey. Although it had some male, it had some male components to it. Very much so, because Mars was there.
Yes. And our fellow traveling companion, Michael, he was our knight in shining armor, wasn't he?
He was, yes.
Very much the Aries archetype was the role that he played.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of fun to look at your life. You know, you can look at it as a whole to see what the different stages are. And then you can look at the microscopic, right? This 1 year piece, and see how it applies to this journey as well. Now, while Campbell came up with these 3 phases, the departure act, the initiation act, and the return act, these 3 phases have been expanded upon into these 12 steps that I've put here on the right side of the screen, and I've color coded them so that you can see that the departure act relates to these 4 steps: the ordinary world, the call of adventure, the refusal of the call, right? That's a big part of that. And then meeting the mentor. And remember, what's unique about Hercules is, you know, he didn't have to do this. And so he didn't go through the refusal of the call. He did this willingly. Then the initiation act. And in the initiation act, you got the crossing of the first threshold, the test, the allies, the enemies, the approach to the inmost cave, the ordeal, and the reward, seizing the sword. We know that from King Arthur, right? He grabs the sword, he pulls it out of the stone, he's got Excalibur, he becomes the king, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the return act, the road back, the resurrection, and the return with the elixir. And so as I go through the 6 phases of the Mars Synodic cycle, you'll see that I'm taking the departure act in its 4 steps, the initiation act in its 4 steps, and the return act in its 3 steps, and I'm aligning those with the 6 phases of the Mars Synodic cycle so that you can kind of come back and follow through.
Absolutely. You know, it's amazing to me as I look at your steps here, your 12 steps. The refusal of the call. I spent almost the entire time in the underworld refusing the call, almost the entire time. I had to fall from the stairs, you know, in order to knock myself out of that refusal.
I know. I know.
And if you don't come out of it fast enough, then I think, you know, you get a little help.
Yes, you do get help. You do get help. The other side of it, I mean, that's a really great way to look at it. The other side of it is you could say that the whole thing was an ordeal. And look at this.
It's an ordeal. Yes, it was. It is. That's the most. I could probably go back and look at my other spiritual journeys and find that this was very, very much in it, represented in it, and I could point it out. This is the only time I've done that is with my France journey.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that this is pretty universal. I mean, you will experience this, everyone.
Exactly.
And even if you don't understand what you're going through.
Right. And see, for me, this first piece of the initiation act, crossing the first threshold, what clearly comes to me is when I got up to Caribou and I passed over the threshold, right? I walked through the front door, the threshold of Caribou, and that's when I was taken over by that energy. And so for me, that's a very palpable memory of crossing the first threshold during that trip.
Yes.
How about you? Something comes to mind for me that I'm remembering. How about you? What do you come up with?
From France, the first the threshold.
Yep.
Shadow? I don't know. I saw shadow.
Remember when we were in the cave? Isn't it interesting?
Yeah. Yes. I became an angry, protective Templar. You know, I mean, holy cow. I would have fought many dragons, you know. It was so powerful. Absolutely. I stepped over into it.
Yeah. To me, that's a palpable example of you crossing the first threshold. And those were on the same day, weren't we? Did we go to Caribou and that cave on the same day?
I can't remember. I'd have to look at my itinerary, but yeah, they were
either the same day or the day before and day after is when those happened for us. Yeah. Wanda, do you have any experiences in your life that relate to this hero's journey that are coming quickly to mind that you'd like to share? Okay, so these 12 steps here that are an expansion on Campbell's original 3 phases are here in this graphic for you, so that you can kind of get another look at what those phases are and what they relate to. And this particular graphic relates to the book The Hobbit, or the movie The Hobbit, if you've seen it based on the book. So here is another way that you can dive deeper into the hero's journey, because really understanding the steps of this journey and what happens at each step is going to be an integral part of us moving forward with this sacred masculine class and the new Aries archetype. You can find this image also in this article here that I've put in on this resource page. But I just wanted to bring your attention to it. I think it's really, really great. See how he's got it divided: Act 1, departure; Act 2, initiation; Act 3, return. Those acts correspond to Joseph Campbell's work. And then within each one, he's got the 12 steps, so that you can understand what you're seeing there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so now let's look at the Mars Synodic Cycle, which is based on the hero's journey. And that's coming from Daniel Gemario, right? He's the one that pulled all this together.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing to know is that the Mars Synodic Cycle is just a little over 2 years, 26 months, 779 days. And it's composed of 6 phases, which is great. It's better to take this stuff in bite-sized pieces, isn't it?
Yes.
You're going to see in a minute that we've already been through phase 0. Ha ha. Phase 0 is the conception, incubation, and gestation phase, and it relates to the departure act and where we're here in the ordinary world. Now, this phase starts when Mars enters the astrological sign of its next synodic cycle. So prior to the birth of the Aries archetype, Mars was in its Aquarius archetype. So as soon as Mars entered Aries for the first time, that's when this phase 0 began. So you see the end of the previous archetype and the beginning of the new archetype, they overlap, they blend together at this phase 0 time. Okay. And this occurs before the Mars-Sun opposition, which is the birth of the archetype, which initiates the next archetype's cycle. Okay. So when I wrote it, we were still in the Aquarius Mars cycle, which began on July 27th of 2018. The birth happened on October 13th, which we've already experienced. But you'll see here that Mars entered Aries on June 27th. So what is that? June, July, August, September. So 3.5 months, let's say. 3.5 months before the birth of the archetype, Mars entered Aries. It's still in the Aquarius archetype, but now we're in the phase 0 of the Aries archetype. And so we're kind of getting a feeling, kind of getting a sense of what that's going to feel like for us when we have the birth. So you think about what? Think about like a butterfly, a caterpillar. He's in the cocoon. It all starts to break down. And now you've got this like cosmic goop, right? That's going to be regenerated into a whole new form. That's kind of what's happening during this phase 0, when the Aquarian energies and the Aries energies are in that goop together. And now the Aries archetype is going to be born out of it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Then we have phase 1, which is where we are now. That's the birth, emergence, and youth phase. And it is the departure act, which I should have color coded to be blue and thought I had. I'll have to go back and fix that. Sorry about that. Plus I missed, I'm gonna have to go back and fix that. Wow. Yeah, the call to action, call to adventure part here. I'll go back and fix those. So this is all still part of the departure act. Phase 0 and phase 1. All right. This, as I said, is initiated when Mars is opposite Sun. And this period includes the birth, youthful education, and the onset of the puberty period for the new God archetype. And this phase ends when Mars returns back to the degree of the Mars-Sun opposition. So let's take that piece and break it down. Remember that the new archetype is birthed when Mars is in retrograde. So Mars is moving back, 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 back. It has the opposition to the Sun. It gets birthed, but Mars is still retrograde, going back, 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 back. At some point, it stations direct and has to come up, 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 up. And when it reaches that same point where it was when it was standing across from the Sun, when the archetype was born, that's when this phase completes. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Wanda, you following this? Okay.
I seem to be.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. So then phase 2, the tasks and challenges. This should be in red to coincide with this. Sorry, guys. The initiation act. This phase is a very, very long phase. This phase can last from anywhere to 8 to 11 months. And it's similar to the 12 labors of Hercules. So this is where now the Aries archetype is meeting the tasks and challenges. And this is happening while Mars is moving across the evening sky. Okay. During this time, as he's moving across the evening sky, he's passing through each of the successive astrological signs. And it's the signs, the astrological signs, the energies, and the themes of the signs that give us insight into the nature of the tasks and challenges that he's facing at each point along the way. And we know, just like in the Venus Synodic cycle, when the Venus and Moon conjunct, we have a gate activation. It's very similar here. When the Moon and Mars conjunct, that's when we are going through a new, or when we're starting a new task or a new challenge. Okay. So that will happen over the course of 8 to 11 months. That's a very, very long phase of these 6 phases. Any question about that? Okay. All right. I thought for sure I had color coded these. Pardon me, I'm getting perseverating on the colors there. All right, phase 3, the underworld. This phase lasts nearly 4 months. And let me just say from the get-go, just like in the Venus Synodic cycle, where we have the underworld phase and we don't do classes during the underworld phase, we're not going to be doing classes during this underworld phase either. So just to be aware of that. But this phase begins when we can no longer see Mars in the evening sky. And we can tell when that's going to happen when Mars is is right about 15 degrees from the Sun. That's when you can no longer start to see it in the sky. So this is an initiation phase. All underworld phases are initiation phases, aren't they, Maureen?
Yes.
And it's during this initiation phase where you must surrender to the process of transformation. You must.
You have to plan. You have to plan ahead. Otherwise, it'll take you by complete and total surprise.
Yes, yes. And the sooner you surrender, the easier it is, isn't it? Otherwise, the world comes along and it lets you fall down the stairs and crack your crown.
Yes.
Or it lets your body fill up with fluid and you can't breathe.
And you can't breathe. Yes.
I'm so glad we can laugh about this now. So anyhow,
Well, yes.
And what's fascinating, I mean, being on the other side of an initiation phase that is so still visceral for us, what's fascinating is even when you're in it, somehow you don't realize you're in it. I mean, because it's so extreme. It's so extreme, and you, at least for myself, you're not aware that there is a real transformation happening. All you're aware of is this breakdown. And
That's right.
The transformational piece of it is completely imperceptible to you. Would you agree with that, Maureen, or did you have a different experience?
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, I would absolutely agree with that. I've told you about I know now when the initiation phase started in Egypt was when I walked into the Holy of Holies of Sekhmet. I didn't know anything about the journey or the stages of a journey. I just wanted to see Egypt, so yeah, that was really incredible. And, so.
Yeah. So
Be interesting to go back and where Mars and Venus were during that time.
It would be. I guess the piece that I'm really trying to underscore here is that even though the transformation is imperceptible, if you know ahead of time that the transformation is actually happening and that you will experience the transformation on the other side at some point, I think that it would make going through this surrender process maybe a little easier to cope with. What do you think, Maureen?
I hope so. That's what I just hope so, because in the past, it hasn't occurred to me what's going on. But now that I'm aware of the stages, maybe it will be easier for me to feel how that's happening in my own life.
Right.
I hope so.
And I'm very optimistic about that, because my experience has been that when you have the awareness heightening around something, now you can cope with it better. And we were just at a stage in our life where, we didn't have that awareness heightening at that particular time. And for better or worse, it served us. But going forward, having the awareness heightening, I think is going to serve us.
Oh, it has served us. Yes. And I think it will help us to recognize those stages when they happen. I hope so. And maybe, this class is going to add to that so much more awareness.
Right, because here we've been going all along consciously engaging with Venus, but not consciously engaging with Mars. And had we been, we would have known that both Venus and Mars were in the underworld at that time. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I even knew they were there. I asked one of the people that I trust to read my chart, and I said, okay, I'm going to France. I'm going to be in the underworld. Mars is coming in. What is going to happen? What should I look for? I got nothing. There was nothing to help me with that. So it was
Yeah.
so strange. I mean, I
Yeah.
even knew that.
Well, and so,
It was
what, go ahead, Maureen.
no, I just, it's just ridiculous that I knew that was happening and that I couldn't put two and two together, and, it was odd, but it's okay
Right.
because I'm aware of it. So,
Well, and so what that signifies to me specifically is that now is the time for this knowledge, from these mysteries are being revealed and coming out and being made available, being revealed to humanity. Now is the time, because as much work as we've done before and we didn't know, it has to do with perfect timing, perfect order. And so that for me just further substantiates the timing of these classes becoming available, so that that wisdom, that knowledge can be available to people.
yeah, through your download. Absolutely.
So the phase 4 is the start of the return act. And that's where we have rebirth, growth, maturity, and wisdom. And this, of course, then happens when now we can see Mars in the sky again. And he rises from the underworld. He's regained his strength and he becomes a fully initiated male. Now, that might hit some women wrong. So let's just pause here, because it's really important, if you're new to this kind of work, to understand that every human being, whether you're a woman or a man, has an inner masculine and an inner feminine. And that Venus in the sky as the sacred feminine represents what's going on within you with your inner feminine, and Mars in the sky as the sacred masculine represents what's going on with you with your inner masculine. So when we say here that Mars is rising from the underworld with his new strength and he's becoming a fully initiated male, that is significant for each and every person, because that means that the inner masculine, your inner masculine, has become initiated into this archetype, into being able to embody the energies of this archetype. So this phase completes when Mars re-enters the astrological sign in which this synodic cycle began. It began in Aries, and so it's going to complete this phase when Mars is in Aries again. But remember, this is over 26 months, right? So here we go. Phase 5, this is the last of the 6. Remember, we started at phase 0. So phase 5 is the last of the 6. It's a part of the return act. This is the elder maturity and knowledge. And this, this is what it's all about, getting that wisdom, having that knowledge. And it represents the pinnacle of the journey. And so you've integrated the knowledge, you've experienced the journey. Look at how much integration you and I have done regarding our trip to France, and how much we've realized through that integration process from those experiences. And now you're ready to share the wisdom. And that's what we're doing. We're sharing the wisdom of that journey that we had through these sacred feminine and sacred masculine classes. And then Mars starts, enters the astrological sign for the next synodic cycle. So that's how it goes.
Yes.
Yep. So this phase 3, this is when we were in France last September. And here we are a year later now. We're sharing the knowledge, sharing the wisdom.
Yes.
Any questions from either of you about these 6 phases? Very, very different than the Venus synodic cycle, isn't it?
Very different. Yes.
That's why we're taking so much time today to go through this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see with Mars that it's particularly dependent on chakra, on the chakras, right?
Right, as the Venus cycle
The
is.
Venus is, yes.
So let's just say here for everybody that's listening to this conversation, we've talked about how the Mars Synodic Cycle is based on the hero's journey. The Venus Synodic Cycle is based on the Inanna myth. And in the Inanna myth, she goes through various gates to go into the underworld, and she comes back through those gates as she leaves the underworld. And each one of the gates that she's passing through is associated with one of your chakras. So that's what Maureen's referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So phase 0, let's look at what happened in phase 0 because we've already been through that. We know that Mars entered Aries on June 28th of this year. That's when this phase started. And that Mars stationed retrograde at 28 of Aries on September 9th, which was 5 days before the Venus third gate activation, which was the throat chakra activation that took place. And I think this is when we started first talking about doing this sacred masculine class, right about that time period, right?
Yes.
And then during this phase, what also happened, which is really significant, was the September 22nd autumn equinox. And the reason that this is really significant, and I'm bringing it into our awareness now, is because at this autumn equinox, where Sun sits at 0 degrees of Libra, 0 and Sekhmet, the goddess Sekhmet, were conjunct. And you will see as we go into the chart of the aspects for this, that they have been traveling together since that time. And they're still within they were at about a 4-degree orb at the autumn equinox, and they're at about a 6 or 7 degree orb now. So they've been traveling together since the autumn equinox. And so Sekhmet has been a very present influence as a representation of the sacred feminine through this Mars phase, this first phase and its birth, this 0 phase and first phase 0 and phase 1, these 2 phases of the Mars archetype. Okay, so here we are. Ta-da. We're in the second phase. We only have 4 more to go. Phew.
Yay!
I'm sorry. You have to have a sense of humor about this stuff.
Yes, you do.
Oh my goodness. So look at what's happening here. This was the birth, the Mars opposite Sun, the birth of the archetype. And here's the hero's journey, where we are, the call of the adventure, tying it back to those 12 steps that I was speaking to you about earlier. And it happened at 21 degrees Aries, 5 minutes. Now, that happened on October 13th. But remember, this was the same day as the Venus heart chakra activation. That happened at 13 degrees Virgo. And the day that Mercury stationed retrograde, 12 degrees of Scorpio. You can see now it's all coming together, all the stuff I said at the beginning. What a potent day October 13th was when this archetype birthed.
Yes.
Now, in this phase, next month, what we've got is Mars stationing direct. Remember, we said he's going backwards, backwards, backwards. He's retrograde. and eventually he's going to station direct. When he does, and that's going to happen at 15 degrees of Aries, that is called Mars at puberty. And that is where the refusal of the call occurs. And that'll happen on November 13th next month. I mean, I don't know how many of you had boys. I had a boy. And when he was in puberty, he refused to do anything. How about you, Maureen? Did your son refuse any calls when he was in puberty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, boys in puberty they're a whole different animal. Okay, and then we remember that this phase 1 ends when Mars comes back to this opposition point. When it returns to 21 Aries, the training and the education is complete. This in the hero's journey is called meeting the mentor, and that will occur on December 15th. So from December into January is when the phase 1 completes. So that's what we're working on now. And see, when we break it down, feels a lot easier to work with, a lot easier to swallow, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Are you going to talk about when the mentor falls away? When the mentor is gone?
We are going to be talking about today, for the rest of this webinar, just the birth of this archetype.
Okay.
Next month, we'll talk about that Mars at puberty and the refusal of the call. And in December, we'll talk about meeting the mentor. Okay.
Meeting the mentor.
Yeah. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's look at this archetype. That's what the rest of this is going to be about, all about this archetype. All right, and as you know, I am terming this Aquarian Aries archetype the fierce protector. He has been known as the rugged individualist. To me, that's the Piscean Aries. And here's a really good image of the Piscean Aries archetype as the rugged individualist. We know the Aries archetype as the knight in shining armor. In every hero's story, that's what that character basically is, the knight in shining armor. But that is evolving. It has evolved. We are no longer in the Piscean age, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. We're in the Aquarian age. And so we need to allow our expansion, our soul expansion, which has already moved to, let me cancel clear. Let me rephrase that. Our soul expansion has already moved into the alignment with the Aquarian frequencies. We need to allow ourselves to catch up with our soul, which is our inner being, the extension of source. We need to consciously choose to shift from the Piscean frequencies into the Aquarian frequencies and catch up with where our soul has already gone ahead of us. Okay. So a beautiful example of somebody who is demonstrating that here and now on the planet is Sasha Stone. This is Sasha Stone. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but I somehow found him right after the lockdown in March. And what impressed me the most, and I didn't know it at the time why, but in all of the videos and interviews that he was doing during that time period, he had a fierceness about him, an adamancy about him, where he was making a call out to all of the men on the planet to get up off their rear ends and just stand up and to defend our rights as humans, to defend their beloveds, their wives, their spouses, their partners, and to defend their children. And that appealed to me. It just pulled me in, and I became mesmerized by wanting to listen to everything that he had to say. Of course, the fact that he talks a lot about sovereignty was another resonation, because we know that the Golden Ray Center, which is our Aquarian Age Goddess Temple, was established for the creation of the restoration of sovereignty and sacred partnership. And so, you know, he is just one of these present day embodiments already of this Aquarian Age Aries archetype, the fierce protector. And he's expressing that work. It would be interesting to know what his Aries overtone, his Mars overtone is. I wonder if it is Aries. But he's expressing that work through these three organizations that he's founded: Humanitad, the New Earth Project, and the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. Anybody can Google these, and for those in the class, I'll put the links for these on the resource page. If you watched the video that I sent you recently that he did with those two people from Spain, I think, that are using that scalar technology to find out what the soul frequencies are. I think both you and Wanda watched that. At the very end, as a surprise for him, they showed the frequencies of these three organizations, which are at 100% alignment and integrity with the purpose for which these organizations were created, and at, I think, 97, 98% transparency for what they're doing. I mean, this is the model. Talk about role model as a key word for what the Aries archetype and the Aries energy is about. The model for how to have these organizations serve and support humanity, serve and support the sacred feminine that is the mother of all humanity. So to me, he's just a glorious example of the Aquarian Aries archetype, the fierce protector, in action today on the planet. Now, what's interesting?
I would agree.
Thank you for that validation. I appreciate that, Maureen. So what's interesting about the Aries archetype, you know, kind of being the knight in shining armor, is in the Piscean age, that knight would wield the sword of justice. But now what he's wielding is the flame of truth. And I love that this evolution can be so perceptible in this analogy. One of the things that the Aquarian Aries archetype as the fierce protector does is he takes what is profane and he makes it sacred.
So can I interrupt and ask a question? I'm really confused.
Yes.
With the Venus journey that we're taking, as Maureen mentioned, we're using the chakras. We started at the head chakra. And then I heard that this is not connected to the chakra, because I kept trying to say, well, is it coming in at the head or where is it? So how is this integrated with the Venus and all of that? I don't understand that.
Okay, I understand what you're asking. Two completely different cycles. That's the first thing to understand. And so the masculine energy is going through an evolutionary process that is different than the feminine evolutionary process. And remember that the sacred masculine is here to serve and support the sacred feminine. So this is why it's going to be very, very different in the way that you experience them individually through their cycles. Where the integration comes in is when we look at and we do your private sessions, when we're looking at your chart and we're seeing here through the aspects, how they're connecting through the aspects on the chart, which we're going to see later. And then in your private session, how that's impacting you individually on a personal level. Does that answer your question, Maureen, or do you need more clarity? I mean, Wanda.
Yeah, could you just give a little bit more clarity? I think I'm starting to grasp what you're saying, and I understand that on the personal reading that you will be giving us, that you'll be explaining how the Mars archetype is showing up for us individually.
So
Okay.
if you think about the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine as two energies that collaborate together, just like you and I collaborate together. Okay. So you are evolving in a way that is unique for you, and I am evolving in a way that's unique for me. Just as the sacred feminine is evolving in a certain way, and the sacred feminine is evolving in a way that's specific to him, which is evidenced by the differences in these cycles. Okay. So now when we come together to collaborate, that's where how we collaborate together starts to show the influence of one on the other. Does that make more sense?
I think it'll make more sense when I have the personal, probably for me, because I seem to always catch up a little bit later. So
That's okay.
thanks
Is
for.
there a more pointed question that you might have that could maybe dive a little deeper into that?
Well, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Maureen, how about you? Do you have anything to contribute to my explanation on that?
No, I missed some of it because I got blanked out again. I had to go in and check my internet connection because it was dropping the class. Did you see me go there?
I
That
did.
I was
I did.
gone?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But just to reiterate the question that Wanda had, and Wanda, if I'm not stating the question properly, please correct me. She was having a confusion around how the Venus sacred feminine energy is related
Mhm.
to the sacred masculine Mars energy because the cycles are so different. Did I state that properly, Wanda?
Mhm.
For me, it's more how is the Mars integrating into the energies? That's where I'm having confusion.
Okay, and so what I was explaining to her is that the integration, because that's the key word I'm hearing, the integration of Mars happens when the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine start collaborating together. That what we're looking at here is just what's going on with the evolution of the sacred masculine energy.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That helps me a lot. Thank you.
Okay, Maureen, anything else you'd like to say to clarify that?
No,
Okay,
no,
excellent.
it's just it goes to my inner. I always think of it as my inner beloved. So,
Yes,
and that's
that's
collaborates with.
that's an excellent statement, because I recall in her first question when she was talking about Venus and the chakras, she could understand an integration there. So maybe Wanda does that help know that what's happening with Mars is related to your inner masculine, and maybe you can personally integrate it that way rather than through the different chakras like we do with the sacred feminine?
I think that does help. And also, so if I'm having more of an understanding, then if the masculine is about our inner, it's our inner struggles, our inner strife, because Mars is about strife, right?
Well, so that's a very good question.
Mhm.
Remember, everything is a polarity. So you've got light, positive, uplifting energies on one side of the polarity, and you've got dark, negative, downward spiraling energies on the other side of the polarity. And so, yes, your inner masculine may have strife and struggles, but he may not. It depends on the balance that you've already achieved within your inner masculine and your inner feminine that determines how you're experiencing them. And I can tell you, you know, Maureen and I are both priestess sisters in the Nicole Christine priestess lineage. And it was through that lineage that we did a lot of work on our inner feminine and our inner masculine, and helping us to bring them into balance, each one individually into balance, so that they were not acting through us from a triggered or shadowed or wounded state. Does that make sense to you?
I'm just still trying to integrate what you said. So,
Okay, Maureen, would you like to speak to it differently for me?
well, I do have one more thing for clarity, if you don't mind, first, Maureen. So,
Yeah.
if Mars is addressing struggles or strife, and I understand that it's not always inner, but it wouldn't just be around thoughts or ideas that we have, then it can also affect different parts of the body.
So I think that where the hitch is that there is an identification with Mars as struggle and strife. And while you may experience it that way, that's not what Mars is.
Okay.
Mars is very much inspired action. You know, if you look at the emotional guidance scale, which tells you where you are in your frequency of alignment, if you're in alignment, if your inner masculine is very balanced, then every time you're inspired into action, that's your inner masculine.
Oh,
Right. So I think that that's where the disconnect might be, is that there is this association with Mars being struggle and strife, when that's not all he is.
and it's not just all in the thought realm, it's other areas of the body.
Yes.
It can, you know, it can be in any expression of your life, is how I would say that. How you relate with people, what's going on physically with you, what's happening in your sacred work, what you value, you know, what your thoughts are, how you create. I mean, it can express itself, both your sacred feminine and your sacred masculine express themselves through all areas of your life, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Maureen,
I-
anything you'd like to
Yeah.
add?
But my experience with, if you talking, like Wanda was talking about different parts of the body, mine is the heart. I would not allow my inner masculine in my heart. I turned my back on him, literally did not want to know him at all. When it was first brought up in my priestess class, I thought, no, I don't care about him. I don't care about him. So I had to go through that whole process of projection. Now, if your masculine and your feminine are not balanced on the inner, if they're not collaborating, then what happens is that you will project those feelings onto the males around you. And that's exactly what I did. I did not want them close to me. My husband could not figure that out. It was just a mystery to him why I was so reserved. But once I learned what I was doing, and I began to look at the solving of that issue as an internal issue rather than being aggravated by males, then it changed. It completely changed. So, yeah, my heart was definitely a part of that process.
And that's a beautiful example, Maureen, an absolutely beautiful example. And I would say that projection is not only limited to the males in your life. If you have a woman in your life that has a strong inner masculine, she can evoke that from you as well.
That's true. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so what this does, and this is a beautiful synchronicity when we're talking about this archetype, the Aquarian archetype, taking what is profane and making it sacred. It's a beautiful lead in to how many people don't understand the difference between the sacred masculine energy, sacred masculine energy, and the men that they, or strong women that have strong inner masculines in their lives, that are not being in the world from this place of sacred masculine energy, but are being in the world from the place of patriarchal energy. And so there's a confusion. Many people don't understand that there's a difference between the sacred masculine energy and the patriarchal energy. The patriarchal energy that most people associate with masculine energy is the sacred masculine that has been made profane. Profane. It is, patriarchy is not sacred masculine energy. And so this is another reason why the timing for these classes is so important, because people need to wake up to the fact that how they've been expressing their masculine energy and how they are experiencing masculine energy in many cases, not always, but in most cases, is patriarchal. It's not sacred. And the other thing that's important to understand is, while there are a lot of priestesses and high priestesses doing work on the sacred feminine, from my experience, and I don't want to speak for Maureen, but we've had this conversation, what I'm seeing is that many of them haven't made this bridge yet from being able to work with the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine together in a collaboration, that they are still using the patriarchal energies in the way that they are presenting even their knowledge about the sacred feminine. What would you have to say about that, Maureen?
Yes, I agree. I completely agree. The pendulum generally will swing too far. Once you start to try to balance it, it will swing too far the other way, and it has to come back. And I think that both the male and the female, the masculine, the feminine, are trying to get back to that balance point after having been swinging too far away from it. And the feminine did the same thing.
Right.
Definitely during the raw burning, ERA kind of feminine power that was so relevant in the 70s. So now it's swinging back to a more balance. It's trying to swing back. And that's the way I see it.
Absolutely. And we see this, in fairy tales where, the little girl is waiting for her Prince Charming to show up and take care of her. That's not sacred feminine and sacred masculine energy. It's not. And
no. Yeah. No.
And this idea that this idea that little boys have been raised saying, toughen up, you don't cry. That's not what a man does. That's not sacred masculine energy. And so humanity is at this place in its collective consciousness and its evolution where it's ready to go back to what is sacred in terms of what is feminine energy that is sacred and what is masculine energy that is sacred. And this is what we're seeing on the world stage with the death of the patriarchy. That's what we're seeing. What would you like to contribute to that, Maureen?
No, I agree. That's what we're seeing.
Does that help you, Wanda?
Yeah,
have an idea?
Yeah.
Between both you and Maureen, it helped tremendously. Thank you.
Okay. Any final words, Maureen?
Good.
Okay.
Um,
So go ahead. Was there something else you wanted to share?
I had something, but I can't think. But
If it comes
I
back to you,
for
just
what
let
it
us know.
was.
Well, if it comes back, just let us know,
Okay,
because it's all very valuable. So, I've spoken.
will.
Okay, good, thanks. I've spoken about Sasha Stone as being a present day embodiment of this Aquarian Aries archetype and of the fierce protector, and how he demonstrates that through his work with Humanitad, New Earth Project, and International Tribunal for Natural Justice. But, let's think about some other masculine figures in our lifetime. Maybe not in some of the younger generations, but definitely in our generation that we're familiar with, that also were really kind of ahead of their time. They were steeped in the Piscean archetype, and yet they were demonstrating already this Aquarian archetype. And to me, John F. Kennedy and his brothers, Robert and Ted, to a certain extent, despite his unfortunate youth incident, in his mature years, demonstrated this Aquarian Aries archetype of being the fierce protector. And so they were really, really ahead of their time. And because the patriarchy was really, even I believe stronger on the world stage during the 60s than it is now. Some people may dispute that with me, because I think that we're seeing the dismantling of the patriarchy. We weren't seeing that then. That's why that these two were assassinated, because they were ahead of the time, and the patriarchy wasn't ready for this Aquarian archetype to be seen yet. Do either of you have any reflections on that dynamic?
Yeah, I think that is why the Kennedys ran into so much resistance. And I can see now that Ted's incident as a young man was his initiation point.
Yes.
That was when his journey restarted. And when he finally emerged, he was so different, and
Yes.
he had so much wisdom to share.
Yes.
And so I can see maybe better than the other two, because I don't know all of their lives, where Ted has been on front stage from the get-go, that you can see the journey so clearly through
Yes.
him.
Yes. And what you can see is that the patriarchy did everything it could to keep the light of his emergence, of his wisdom, in the shadow. They would
Absolutely.
not let him
And
forget what had happened.
Started with his father. He tried to keep him down, and because he didn't think enough of him, think he was enough of a man. But it turned out he was the one who was able to fulfill the prophecy of the family, that somebody from this family is going to make a big difference, over time. And he was the one that got the opportunity.
Yes, yes. And he became the head of that family. Let's not call him the patriarch of that family. He became the head of that family, the leader of that family, the fierce protector of that family.
Yeah. They all loved him so much. So
yeah. And so not only were the Kennedys examples, but during that time, so was Martin Luther King. He had a dream, and that dream that he was expressing was this Aquarian Aries archetype. So we were already being introduced to this. How long has it been? 40, 50 years ago? How long? I can't even,
Yeah.
I'm 57 and I was born in 63. 60 years ago, 50, 60 years ago, we were already being introduced to this Aquarian archetype. And what I love about
Yeah.
JF, go ahead. Go ahead,
No, I
Maureen.
was going to say yes, and they were all killed. They were all killed
Yes.
for it. All three of them.
Yes. Yes, as was Gandhi,
That's what I say.
right?
Yes.
Another Aquarian Aries
Exactly.
archetype. Yeah. So,
Anwar Sadat. Do you remember him?
yes. Yes.
Another one
Absolutely.
killed after he tried to make peace. You know.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the patriarchy, which the Piscean Aries archetype was really controlled by, wasn't going to have any of it. And so what I love about the Kennedys, especially John Kennedy, is this idea of the return to Camelot. And how does that tie in with this Aquarian Aries archetype? And so we go back to the hero of Camelot, Arthur, right? And it's, when we talk about the return of Camelot, it's a symbol of that Arthurian world where the round table was a symbol of the equality that existed amongst those 12 knights, and the code to which the knights committed themselves to. Patriarchy has no code that it is committed to. It is committed to self and only self. Service to self, that's patriarchy. But service to others, that's the code that those knights committed themselves to. And it's interesting because I didn't know that, even though we studied this novel in high school. It's interesting to note that the round table was supposedly patterned after a table to commemorate the Last Supper of Christ, and the Grail table established by Joseph of Arimathea at the command of the Holy Spirit. So you see, there are sacred masculine energies even being represented in that round table. And then the name Camelot, which is used to represent, an ideal place of high values and morals. You could even say high ideals. And so, that's what I believe that Humanitad, New Earth Project, the ITNJ, and other organizations like ours, similar to them, that's what we're doing, is that we are offering to humanity, and that this Aquarian Aries archetype is going to allow the inspiration for other organizations like ours and Sasha's to be able to bring forth these places of high ideals, high values, high morals, where we are committed to these codes, and where equality, conscious, equal partnership does exist. Now, the Aquarian Aries archetype is inspired by Shakti. Shakti is that sacred feminine energy, that life force energy that creates everything. That's what inspires this archetype. And he's driven by passion, not rageful passion, but passion where this is what I have to do. This is what I am living for. It is what I get up for. It's what I think, eat, and breathe every day. Passion. That Vesta, goddess Vesta, passion. And it's aligned with truth and right justice. That's what this Aquarian Aries archetype is. And I think that, you can see that through the strength of character, that it leads with impeccable integrity, that it embodies selfless love, and it expresses protective love. And yes, still is the protector of the tribe, that protects the innocent ones and defends what is right. And yes, still defends us from the dark ones and those who would seek to do harm to the earth. But I think that, going over this, that you can kind of sense this shift from what was the Piscean Aries archetype as the rugged individualist to who we are now invoking and consciously choosing to engage as the Aquarian Aries archetype of the fierce protector. Do either of you have anything that you'd like to share regarding your being introduced to this archetype? So because I cannot see your faces, it would help if I got a yes or no response.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
I see yours, so I assume you can see mine. I'm sorry.
No, your face is not on. Do you want to turn your camera back on, or
Did I turn?
you turn off so that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know why it goes back to that. When I came back on after having been kicked out,
Right.
the set must have returned. I don't know how to do it.
Let me
I'm
see
on
if
my-
I can send you an invitation to turn it on. Hold on.
Oh, wait, here it comes. I see it up here. Oops. It might not let me. Yes. Okay.
There you are.
Sorry.
And so just to apologize, that's why I was inadvertently speaking over you, because I didn't have any nonverbal language to connect with.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know. I'm usually on my computer, and this time I'm on my iPad, and I don't know it as well where I can let things happen, except I get kicked off.
That's okay. But at this juncture, I would really value hearing your impressions of this shift from the Piscean Aries archetype to the Aquarian Aries archetype and what's coming up for you around that.
Well, this election has proven to be, to me, an example of the end of the patriarchy. Now, a lot of people think that's a downfall of our president, that he represents the patriarchy in its worst form. There are others who feel that he is representing the Aries archetype, the fierce protector.
You mean
So
the Aquarian archetype?
yes, exactly. So it's hard for me, to put it in any exact terms, because I have had both opinions at different times during this last year, and so I'm all over the place when it comes to seeing this reality. So it's difficult.
Right. Well, and so we can see here, I think that most people that have some level of awakening are able to recognize that what's happening on the world stage is definitely, if we're not at the death of the patriarchy, we're certainly at a strategic demantling, right? Destructuring of the patriarchy.
Mm-hmm. I think everybody pretty much would agree with that, in one way or another. Yeah.
Unplugging the patriarchy. And in fact, there's a fabulous book that I read during my priestess work called Unplugging the Patriarchy. I don't remember the author's name at the top of my head, but anybody watching this video, I would encourage you to read that book, and it would help you with both the sacred feminine classes and the sacred masculine classes, and in understanding what's happening on the world stage right now.
Okay.
Wanda, any final comments before we move on? Okay. So This is so super groovy. I love this. So, as we're talking about the fierce protector archetype, let's look at the difference between the Piscean archetype and the Aquarian archetype. 713 years ago on October 13th, when we were still in the Piscean archetype for Aries, what happened? The Templars were arrested and burned at the stake. Isn't that amazing? That the birth of the Aquarian archetype is happening on October 13th.
Yes.
And so for me, I just, knowing that the birth of this archetype is happening on October 13th, I couldn't help but remember what happened to the Templars, right? The Piscean archetype for Aries 700 years ago. Now, a lot of people ask, well, when was the Piscean era or Piscean age, the Aquarian age? I remember that song by Marilyn McCoo, the fifth dimension.
Fifth dimension.
Yeah, the age of Aquarius. Yeah. And so what I will tell you is that there are various ways that people calculate when the Piscean age ends or has ended, and when the Aquarian age will begin or has begun. And there's an article here that I've given the link to that'll be on the resource page that discusses that. But first, most people don't know what is an astrological age. What is the Piscean age? What is the Aquarian age? What defines that? And so what we can see here is that what is considered a great year is 25,920 years period of precession. Now, getting into precession, that's a whole deeper topic. So if you don't know what a precession is, I invite you to go research that. But the main thing I want you to get out of this is that this 25,920 year period is known as a great year. And you take the great year and you divide it by the 12 astrological signs. And what you get is 2,160 years. So it is considered for an astrological age to be 2,160 years long. So the Piscean age was 2,160 years long. The Aquarian age will be 2,160 years long. So what was the end point and the beginning point between the two? That's the question. And that's what many people have different opinions about. And there are various methods for calculating when the age of Aquarius began or when it will begin. And for me personally, I prescribe to the idea that it began in 2012. And that what's interesting is that this year, 2020, is the first time that Mars has been in Aries since 1988, which was 32 years ago. So you can see that from the last time Mars was in Aries, that would be considered the Piscean age until now, when we have come into the Aquarian age. So this demonstrates that just in that 32-year period, we have shifted from the Piscean archetype for Aries to the Aquarian archetype for Aries. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. This particularly struck me in a deep way because, of course, we were in France, a year ago in the Templar region and had our own Templar experiences with past lives. And so, I just couldn't help but be aware of this correlation.
Right.
Yeah.
You got thrown off
Okay.
the cliff, and I said, you got thrown off the cliff and I got burned. So,
Yeah. Woo.
I know.
But we made it here and we found each other. Goodness. So now that we know what the archetype is all about, let's look at what the aspects were in the sky. What was going on in the sky on October 13th this month when the birth of that archetype took place? And let me tell you, gorgeous Gaias, that it took a bit of time for me to get my head around this because I kept seeing the pieces. And it wasn't until really late that I realized that the pieces connected together. And it was just like, wow. And you'll see that when I show you. Well, let me show you now. And then we'll come back to the slide. Here's what it looks like on the chart.
Okay.
Yeah. So imagine trying to having to unravel that ball of yarn and figure.
Whoa. No.
But since we're on this slide already, the first thing that I saw in this was this image of the Kabbalah tree of life. Do either of you see that in this image?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, this harkens back to this idea that we've talked about before in the Venus classes, the sacred feminine classes, this Aquarian archetype of divine creation. And so just to give everybody that may be watching this a little frame of reference for that, in the Piscean age, when we talked about the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, we talked about them in terms of the Piscean archetype of Hieros Gamos, sacred union, sacred marriage. But as you'll discover, if you read the blog post that I did, and there's a link to it further down, and I'll point it out later, when we were in France last year, and we visited the seat of Isis at Rennes-les-Bains, we had a huge activation when we were there. And for me, that's where I realized that Piscean archetype of Hieros Gamos has now been upgraded to the Aquarian archetype of divine creation. And so the fact that both the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine had these very potent events happen on October 13th on the same day, and that this chart represents, to me, I can see clearly in it, it's not exact, it's not perfect, but I can definitely see this Kabbalah tree of life here, very much to me harkens back to this Aquarian archetype of divine creation. All right, let's see what these aspects are. We're going to take them in 3 chunks. The first thing I want to point out to you, which blew my mind. I mean, my mind was blown first when I recognized the first Grand Cross. And then I recognized, oh my gosh, there's a second Grand Cross. Blew my mind. Now, I mentioned before that we've talked about these different astrological aspects in terms of what they mean, and that you can get most of those definitions in the first 2 or 3 recordings of the sacred feminine classes. But the one that we had not come across yet in that class is the Grand Cross. And what happens with the Grand Cross is you've got luminary bodies in 4 different signs, and each sign is one of the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. And so they make an equilateral cross in the sky. And many people define a grand cross in very challenging ways. And for me, that's still the old Piscean frequency. For me, the way that I defined a grand cross is infinite possibilities for creation and breakthroughs in consciousness. And if you think of a grand cross, let's go back to one of the most simple astrological aspects, the square. The square happens when one luminary body is 90 degrees away from a second luminary body. You get that 90-degree angle, that right angle, and we call that aspect a square. And I've said time and time again that for me, a square is an opportunity for a breakthrough in consciousness. You must choose to cross the threshold to have that breakthrough. If you don't choose to cross the threshold, you will not have the breakthrough. That's why it's an opportunity, because you can either grab the gold ring or not. It's your choice. Okay. So when we look at a grand cross, how many right angles do we see?
1, 2, 3, 4.
4. And in a circle, if you make a cross through the circle, you're dividing the circle this way and that way. You're only going to have 4 right angles. And so that's why I interpret this as infinite possibilities, because a circle is infinite. For creation, because the entire chart is the roadmap for creation and breakthroughs in consciousness. So that's where I derive my interpretation of a grand cross, which I don't know where else you're going to see that. You may, but I haven't come across it. So look at this. We have not 1, but 2 grand crosses. I mean, this is phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so for everybody that's been having any challenges since October 13th, no wonder, because look at all of the thresholds that you are being given the opportunity to choose to cross or not. We're talking 8 different thresholds between these 2 grand crosses. This is heavy duty. This is like mega wattage. I mean, I can't even think of, potency to express how you may be feeling. I'm getting the image of, like the old racks where they would tie your wrists and your ankles, and then they would crank it and you'd get right. That's how you're going to be feeling if you are not aware of or not choosing on some level to cross these thresholds for breakthrough. And I know, especially around the 13th, because that's the day that I experienced my traumatic brain injury, I was feeling that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the day I got my book, my first book about the timelines.
Mm.
Yeah, I got a book called The Midnight Library, which is a different, I collect time travel, but this is a different look at Akashic records. They maybe didn't mean for it to be, but it is.
Mhm.
And where you explore all the different ways that you make decisions,
Yeah.
and how the outcomes will be different
Right.
if you'd made a different decision at that point,
Right.
that's a very interesting concept to me.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
kind of like all those opportunities, we can look at different ways that we may have decided differently and what that would have meant. And in doing that, you can actually shift the
Yes.
timeline.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of the timelines, I mean, with 2 grand crosses at this birth, we could look at infinite timelines that we could choose to manifest.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's when I got that book. It's the same day that you had your experienced. It was, just one of those little nudges that we get. Some of them are bigger than others, but
What was the name of the book again, Maureen?
it's called The Midnight Library by,
Thank-
let's see, by Mark Haight, Hait, The Midnight Library.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thanks for that. Thanks for that. I'll be interested in looking at that book. So let me just say, for time purposes, we're already at just 2 hours and 40 minutes. And so I want to get through all of this. And I'm not going to go into real detail about each of the elements involved of these grand crosses. You can see them here. What I would like to point out, which is interesting though, you'll notice that I've got Ishion in the North Node underlined in yellow, and Yeshua and Magdalene underlined in orange. And I think it's fascinating that those 4 luminary bodies are intrinsic in both of these grand crosses. So not only do we have the 4 oppositions that make up these 2 grand crosses, we have another opposition. Juno, Mercury retrograde, Merlin and Arthur opposite Uranus retrograde. And just to remind you of what we discussed in terms of oppositions, this opposition, this axis, is that line of polarities. And what this opposition is doing is it's giving us an opportunity to blend the energies of these polarities and bring them to a higher frequency where we create something new. So that's what's happening through all of this.
So when you say like to blend these opportunities and to bring something new, how would one go about doing something like that?
So this is an interesting question, Wanda, because we're dealing with frequencies, we're dealing with energy. So if, for instance, on this axis here of the Juno, Mercury, Merlin, Arthur, opposite Uranus, we're dealing with a luminary body in the Taurus energies here and luminary bodies that are in the Scorpio energies there. And there's, infinite ways to translate what those energies are and how they can show up for us and how we can work with them. And so the process of that blending and merging up here at a higher frequency is an alchemical process. It happens within us. And so we don't have to know what to do or how to do it or what we want to make and how we're going to make it. It happens.
Oh,
We just allow it.
well, and I know that you want to keep it kind of brief, but I'm just so curious on like the grand crosses where you said there's infinite possibilities, where like with Joshua and Magdalene, are we needing to do any thought processes or ask for in prayers for changes, or does that automatically happen too?
It all automatically happens in a very alchemical way. And so this is where I'm going to pull in some of the principles of the law of attraction. And that has to do with the fact that you are a continuously evolving and expanding being. You have already created all of this. And so all you have to do is allow yourself to align with what you've created. And the way that you do that and the way that you know that you're doing that is based on how you feel. Are you feeling uplifted? Are you feeling not so uplifted? And so when you're feeling uplifted, you are in alignment and you're allowing all of that to come into your physical reality. And it's that easy.
Wow. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah.
Wow. For going into that.
Yeah.
That was quite relieving. Thank you.
Yes. It's the thing to understand is that there's nothing that we have to do. There's nothing that we have to fix. everything as it's unfolding is perfect. And even when it's not comfortable, and even when we don't understand it, it is serving a purpose to create something more that we do desire. And so everything is always in the perfect timing, perfect place, whether it's perceptible to you or not. So this will unfold. And it is unfolding. It is unfolding now. So let's look at, we've looked at the chart. There are a couple things here I want to point out to you. First of all, 3 days after the birth of the Aquarian Aries archetype, we had the new moon in Libra. And it happened here at 23, almost 24 degrees of Libra. And look where that falls. That falls right between where the sun and Sekhmet are. And remember, the birth happens when Mars and the sun are across from each other in the sky. So this is something that's really significant to understand about the birth of this archetype. When it was birthed, Eris, the goddess of radical truth, was conjunct Mars. And Sekhmet, remember I talked about how the autumn equinox took place in phase 0, was still conjunct the sun. And so those energies of Eris and Sekhmet, those sacred feminine energies, are very much blended into the birth of this new Aquarian Aries archetype. And that is a signal that this is a new archetype. It is not at all tainted by patriarchy. The other thing is where this new moon took place on October 16th, it's conjunct where Mercury is going to go direct on election day. I think it was 25 degrees, 23, 25, both of them falling in between this aspect of this archetype's birth. And so again, this is why I'm feeling very optimistic that whatever the outcome of this election, whatever it may look like, don't allow yourself to attach to it. Be assured that however it looks, something very positive is coming out of it. Because it's happening here in Libra, right? The sign of sacred, of the sacred partner, the sign of conscious equal partnership. The other thing I want to point out real quickly on this chart has to do with the full moon that's coming up at the end of this month on October 31st. And it just so happens to coincide with the cross quarter celebration of Samhain. And that's happening at 8 degrees Taurus, 8.5 degrees Taurus. And that's going to be right here where this Uranus and Mercury opposition. Uranus right there. So that full moon, remember, new moons are about planting new seeds of consciousness. New seeds of consciousness. And this full moon is about illuminating that new consciousness. So this opposition here, what's being created, how these Taurus, Scorpio energies are blending together and being lifted up to this higher frequency, that's being created is what's going to be illuminated at that full moon. So pay attention to that. And then the other thing I want to point out is of all of the luminary bodies of this chart, every single one of them is engaged with the exception of Chiron, the cosmic shaman. Now, I've never seen anything like this before. Never. And so technically, because Yeshua is at 28 degrees of Pisces and Chiron, I think, is at 6. Remember, we talked about an orb or a conjunction being from 5 to 10 degrees separation. Chiron is close enough to technically be considered conjunct Yeshua. But for the purposes of this Grand Cross, which I'll go over in a minute, I didn't include it. And because it's right there, you'll see on the other charts that normally when I look at the shamanic medicine, I look at the shamanic medicine in terms of where Chiron is showing up. But because we have all of these oppositions going on, these 5 oppositions, I'm looking at the relationship paths that each of these axes are engaged with, and I'm looking at the shamanic medicine of each of those areas as areas as well. So you'll see that as we go forward. Of course, in your private sessions, we'll go much, much deeper into what all of this means and specifically what it means for you and how this Aquarian Aries archetype is evolving within you. Any questions about any of that?
I don't have any questions, but when I look at that chart, it just feels like it's just an explosion, a good explosion going in every direction. It's almost like it's a starburst or a creation of brand new creation. It's beautiful.
Exactly. Because remember what I said about the Aquarian archetype of divine creation? That is represented by this Kabbalah tree of life. Yes, the Yeshua Magdalene. Yes, that's exactly what it is. The fact that her gate activation happened in the heart chakra. This archetype of divine creation is being seated in the heart chakra of every person on this planet. So whether people understand it or not, they are evolving. And whether people understand it or not, the collective consciousness of humanity is evolving. Isn't that spectacular? I mean, I love this. This is beautiful.
It is.
It brings me to tears.
It does. It really does. It does me too, Wanda. It really does.
Me too. Mm.
And it just makes what's happening on the world stage seem so insignificant. I mean, not that it doesn't matter. People still play their role and do their sacred work. But, when you take this very large, multi-dimensional look at where we are right now, from this bird's eye view, it seems insignificant.
Well, yeah, it sure does. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. But the beetle that's being eaten by the lizard doesn't think that what's going on is insignificant.
No. No, that's true.
So there you go. All right. Let's look at all of this. This is intense. I'm not going to go through a lot of this because you can read through it. I do want to point out the paths that are being activated through the grand crosses and through that final opposition with this Mars Eris Sun Sekhmet opposition. And of course, this is the aspect that birthed the new Aquarian Aries archetype. Okay. This is happening on the path of conscious equal partnership. I'm telling you, you cannot make this stuff up. if there was any doubt that the Aquarian archetype of divine creation is being seeded in the hearts of humanity, here it is.
Yes.
Yep. And then let's look at this side of the Grand Cross. Medusa and Asmodeus in Cancer, opposite Jupiter, Pluto, Saturnia, and Capricorn. This axis is the path of family, home, and community. And it has to do with creating space in our homes, in our families, and in our communities where children can be safe. And that's why we're seeing so much on the world stage about the safety of children. We have to be aware so that we can create something new. We have to see that that's not what we want so that we can choose and create what we do want. And so for
Right.
those of you that are maybe tuning in for the first time, the definitions that are keywords that I use to describe these luminary bodies, you'll see down here. What does the Cancer energy mean? Who is Medusa? She is the goddess of valor, and she represents the patriarchal fears that paralyze us. Who is Asmodeus? He shows us where our inner demons are, and so forth and so on. You'll see that for each of these. And what's most important in terms of the work that we do here through the Sacred Feminine and Sacred Masculine classes is really having a keen understanding of who we know and understand Yeshua and Magdalene to be, because they are the two representatives of the Sacred Feminine and the Sacred Masculine that have come together in the Aquarian archetype of the divine creation. And so we see that Yeshua is an embodiment of Christ consciousness. He is in the Aquarian archetype of divine creation, and he is the twin flame of Magdalene. And he is also the high priest in sacred service to conscious equal partnership. And Magdalene, she's the embodiment of the Sophia consciousness. That's that wisdom. And she's a part of the Aquarian archetype of divine creation, and she's the twin flame of Yeshua. And she's also the high priestess in sacred service to conscious equal partnership. And so, they modeled that on the planet 2,000 years ago, and people have gotten lost. They missed that part of the story. They've gotten lost in the crucifixion. They've gotten lost in her being labeled a prostitute. And just like we evolve, these beings have evolved, and people keep relating to them as they were 2,000 years ago. And it's time to start relating to them in terms of who they have evolved into and the work that they are doing for our planet, for the cosmos, for the collective consciousness of humanity right now. And that was the wisdom and the insight that I received when I was sitting on the seat of Isis last September at Rennes-les-Bains in France. And I did write a blog about that, and there's a link down here later that I can point out to you. So these are the two axes that are being activated by this Grand Cross: the path of family, home, and community, the path of conscious equal partnership. I mean, how can I say that any better, any more clearly? Conscious equal partnership means that both parties, the masculine and the feminine, are equal partners. One does not rule over the other. One does not dominate the other. One does not subjugate itself to the other or give up its will to the other. They are equal. So those are the two paths being activated by this Grand Cross. And this Grand Cross is a Grand Cross made up of cardinal signs. There's three kinds of signs. There's cardinal signs, mutable signs, and fixed signs. And in our Sacred Feminine classes, we haven't really delved into these kinds of signs. But when you're dealing with a Grand Cross, they become significant because they help you understand what's happening through this grand cross. So we'll look at that in just a minute. Okay, here we go. We're going to look at the shamanic medicine that's being activated through this grand cross, and let's look at these cardinal signs. They initiate and begin things. It makes sense that the Mars-Sun opposition happened in cardinal signs because it's an initiation of this new archetype. They are enterprising and have a will to accomplish something, oftentimes something new. Yes, we've seen examples of the Aquarian Aries archetype on this planet, but it is now here and it is here to stay. So what is the shamanic, excuse me? I'm sorry, did I hear
I just said yay.
Yay. Yes.
Yay. I
Let's
just said
do it.
yay.
Yes, let's do it. All right, so let's look at the shamanic medicine that's in this particular grand cross. With Aries, we're dealing with self-love and personal identity. So the questions that you can ask yourself, and remember that these questions can help you discover the demons that you still have within you, the shadow pieces that within you that are you're being given an opportunity to face and let go of, and in the letting go process become empowered by. Okay, so do I have the right to exist, and if so, how do I exert that right? With Cancer, we've got the shamanic medicine of exquisite self-care, particularly of our emotional body. And I've added in here the inner child, because when we shifted from the Piscean archetype of Hieros Gamos, right, the union of the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, people were still dealing with the wounded inner child. But now that we have received onto the planet the Aquarian archetype of divine creation, the wounded child is no longer wounded. It is now the golden child, and it is a part, it is a piece of that Aquarian archetype of divine creation. And so this Cancer medicine can help you, if your inner child is still in that wounded space, transmute itself, transform itself, become that golden child. And so we ask ourselves, how do I practice moving up that emotional guidance scale that I referred to earlier? And I'm going to show you that scale on the next slide. And how do I nurture and care for my inner child? With Libra, the shamanic medicine that we're getting is the openness to loving and being loved, no matter what. And so we ask ourselves to look for the places where we're not doing that. How do I relate and bond in relationships without wounding others and without being wounded by others? Because this wounding process, as Maureen talked about earlier, it's the projection of shadow. That's what that wounding process is. Where shadow is where you have forgotten about a piece of yourself, or have given that piece of yourself away, or have, in some cases, what would you say, lost along the way. And then the Capricorn medicine is responsibility for your contribution. What is it that I have to contribute to the world? When I'm contributing to the world, I'm acting out of service to others. When I'm not contributing to the world, or I'm contributing in a way that is causing separation and damage, then we're in service to self. And so what do I have to contribute to the world? And can I take responsibility for my contribution? And for me, when I say, can I take responsibility for my contribution? It kind of goes back to that scalar technology that gentleman and lady were sharing with Sasha Stone in that video, you know, about what is my integrity? I'm contributing this in the world. How is my integrity aligned with, you know, my intention for this contribution? Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, thank you for that verbal response. I appreciate it. All right, let's look at this second Grand Cross. All right, this one is in mutable signs. Okay, so this Grand Cross is going to have a very different feel, very different intention, so to speak, as the cardinal Grand Cross. And here we've got Yeshua and Magdalene on that Pisces Virgo axis, the Aquarian archetype of divine creation. You're going to see that on slide 31. And that they're on, which I love, they are on the path of the helpmate. And so what is the helpmate? The helpmate is someone who is as equally dedicated to their sacred work as you are to yours, and or supports your sacred work. And where are they doing that from? In Pisces, we're talking about source, the source field, unity consciousness, unconditional love. And in Virgo, we're talking about being the priest and priestess of sacred work and the creator of sacred space. I mean, this to me is the most spectacular manifestation of what I received in my understanding, my download on that seat of Isis about this Aquarian archetype of divine creation. Now, you'll notice here, because I initially had this as a T-square, because you'll see here, Yeshua's at 28 Pisces, Magdalene's at 28 Pisces at Virgo, and Ishion is at 28 Sag. Ishion is the unforgivable wound. But then I noticed when I looked at the chart, and let me bring up that chart again so you can see it. Look at where the North Node is.
Mhm.
Almost at 22 degrees, 2159. So it's within that 10-degree window. It's 6 degrees away from being exactly across from Ishion. But to me, I thought, you know what? It's calling out to be included in this Grand Cross. Because what is the North Node? It's the indication of our evolutionary GPS. It's our evolutionary GPS, where it is, where we are evolving towards. And that's why I included it as a Grand Cross and not simply as a T-square. And this particular opposition between the North Node and Ishion, and isn't it great? This speaks to what I just said about the inner wounded child being transmuted into the golden child as a part of this Aquarian archetype of divine creation. Because Ishion is the unforgivable wound, and the North Node is where we are evolving towards. Do you follow that?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is happening on the Gemini Sagittarius axis, and that's the path of the questmate. So isn't it spectacularly beautiful that this Grand Cross includes the path of the helpmate and the path of the questmate? I mean, when I say you can't make this stuff up, I mean, this is infinite intelligence that we are seeing come together here. So the questmate is someone who walks beside you on your spiritual path. And on this path with your questmate, there is a lot of space and freedom. So what can happen is you may know each other, like Maureen. I would say she's a questmate for me. We met in France last year I live in Florida. She lives in Washington. When will we ever meet up again? Well, we're intending to. But it may not happen. And so we've got that space, we've got that freedom. That's the kind of dynamic that's referring to. And also the quest for truth is honored. You know, she's my Venus buddy. And this is what links us together. We are helpmates and we are questmates for each other. And of course, the quest mate comes from that Sagittarius energy, which is always questing for higher truth, seeking for higher truth. And with both Maureen and I having the Venus overtone of Sagittarius, you know, it makes sense that we are helpmates and questmates for each other.
Absolutely.
So here with the Sagittarius energy, where Ischion is the unforgivable wound, look at what's happening here. We're going into expanded states of consciousness. You cannot take a wound into an expanded state of consciousness. It will not happen. And this again speaks to the fact that those wounded inner children in every person on this planet is being evolved into the golden child. And so even if you can't feel it, even if you don't see it in your life, even if it's completely imperceptible to you, you can rest assured, you can rest confidence in the knowing that this is happening. Is there anything about that you'd like to share, Maureen, as my questmate and my helpmate?
No, I mean, I agree with you. Yes, that is definitely the quest we are on. We are questmates. And I see that there's a lot of information here that hasn't downgraded yet into my, application. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just feeling not overwhelmed, not that, but feeling full of all these possibilities that are opening up. And I'm really grateful that I don't have to know exactly what that is, because as an ego-driven person, as most of us are, we want to know.
Right.
I want to know exactly what's happening and how I'm going to process this.
Right.
I'm not comfortable in that area of being okay with not knowing. And that's been a struggle all along for me. So I am actually in that space right now. I don't know, and yeah.
I'm gonna start. I'm gonna get ready to go.
Okay.
How long is this master class gonna continue?
A little bit longer.
Okay.
I can't remember what I was saying.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
So, but this is a powerful Grand Cross. So let's see what it means in terms of the shamanic medicine and the fact that it's happening in these mutable signs. So the thing about the mutable signs is that they adapt and accept, which is exactly the kind of environment you need if you're going to evolve.
Yes.
Again, North Node. I mean, this is infinite intelligence. You cannot make this stuff up. And they end things to begin something else, or they change things into something else. This is the energy, this is the environment, this is the sacred space that we require for that wounded inner child to be transformed into that golden inner child. I mean, to me, it's just the most magnificent, beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, it is, for sure.
Yeah. So let's look at the shamanic medicine. With Virgo, the medicine is the ability to walk between the worlds of human and divine. and the questions that you can ask yourself to discover where any demons may be hidden there, any shadow aspects are hidden there, is how do I resolve the conflict between my body and my spirit? And can I let go of perfectionism and know, not believe, but know I am good enough? That's very powerful, very powerful. With Gemini, the medicine is trusting our intuition, but more than our intuition, which people refer to as that gut feeling, trusting your inner guidance. People discount their inner guidance. People don't even know what their inner guidance is when they're receiving it. So this is a huge piece of medicine. And the questions you can ask is, can I allow myself to open to my higher mind? It's from the higher mind where this inner guidance is coming. And can I trust what I receive and how I'm discerning it? With the Sagittarius shamanic medicine, we're looking at spiritual meaning and purpose. And of course, this has profound meaning and purpose for us because of our Venus overtone being in Sagittarius. What is my truth? What do I believe? What has heart and meaning to me? And this question, what has heart and meaning to me, has been a guiding force my entire life. I could never take a job, a job, just for the money. And it would drive my parents crazy because if the work didn't mean something to me, I wasn't interested in it just to earn the money.
No, absolutely. My son is like that. Actually, my daughter is too.
Yeah. And then the Pisces shamanic medicine, merging with the divine, also known as the higher self, without losing your individuality. Two pieces here, who we are here and who we are an extension of there. So how can I surrender to the divine cosmic consciousness without losing myself? And in terms of the old Piscean archetype, how can I live in the world, but not of the world? So that's the shamanic medicine being offered through this particular Grand Cross.
Yes.
So let's look at the final. Oh, here is the image that I shared earlier of Yeshua and Magdalene that I think so beautifully represents that Aquarian archetype of divine creation. Look at where their hands are joined.
Yeah.
Right near the heart chakra.
Mm-hmm.
And here, for those of you that are following along for the first time, here's where that blog post is. I should tell you, I guess there's not a link there. My website is thegoldenraycenter.com. Golden Ray, R-A-Y, center.com. And if you click on the blog, you can search for this post, the Aquarian, might say twin flame archetype of divine creation. And now here is the emotional guidance scale that I keep referring to. And this is straight out of Esther Hicks and the Abraham material. And so it shows you, where you are on this scale in terms of how you're feeling good and feeling bad. And can you identify what that emotion is? And the really great thing I love about their work is if you're down here feeling jealous about something, all you have to do to start moving up the scale is start feeling hatred and rage. And while that may not make sense to the mind, you are now at a higher frequency. And once you're feeling hatred and rage, now all you have to do is get to a place where you're feeling revenge. And little by little, you work yourself up. Now I'm feeling angry about it. But you can't jump from angry to feeling hopeful. It cannot happen. You have to go through each of these frequencies to uplift yourself to feeling hopeful. And so I love this because at any time when you become aware of feeling something that doesn't feel good to you, you have the ability to take control over it and shift in the moment,
Okay.
realign yourself with your inner being. That inner being that is the source, is an extension of source, that knows who you are, that knows who you're catching up to, who doesn't feel anger or blame or worry about what's going on that you're feeling anger, blame, and worry about. So this is very much a part of the Cancer energies. And remember, for you specifically, Maureen, remember that in the 9th house for you, Cancer, the Great Mother, is your cosmic guru. And so she can teach you how to do this. Are you still with me? I don't know if you've frozen or not. So did you hear the piece I shared about how the Great Mother, who is your cosmic guru, can teach you this?
No.
Okay,
I
yeah.
missed that.
Yeah. Okay, so what I was saying is that this emotional guidance scale is very much a part of the Cancer energy. And that for you specifically, because I know where Cancer is in your chart, that the Great Mother, who is the goddess of Cancer, is your cosmic guru. And she can teach you how to consciously engage with and use your emotional guidance scale.
Okay.
Good. We
Thank
can
you.
talk more about that later if you'd like.
All right.
Good. Okay. Let's scroll down here. All right. The last aspect is this Juno Mercury retrograde, Merlin Arthur in Scorpio opposite Uranus retrograde in Taurus. So this is happening on the path of intensity. And on the path of intensity, your relationship should be refueling you and recharging you. So this is a pretty groovy path, I believe. And it just goes back to the fact of, you know, how much these Scorpio energies are a part of birthing this new Aries archetype because of this aspect that's happening here. So we see here that we've got Mercury that being conjunct Juno, the goddess of sacred partnership, conjunct Merlin, the cosmic magician. The cosmic magician in Scorpio, I mean, that's incredible. Arthur, cosmic law, preserving and maintaining righteousness, being an awakened being. You know, they say that you can only pull Excalibur from the stone if you are an enlightened being. And so we haven't looked at these asteroids before, which is why I'm taking the time to look at them now for you to see these energies that we're incorporating into this Mars journey. So these are some new pieces that we haven't looked at before with Merlin and Arthur. You know, Merlin being a warrior priest, that's the old Piscean Aries archetype, but even he is being evolved. And so we see that he becomes, you know, the advisor and the prophet, that he is a seeker and discoverer of these mysteries, these Scorpio death and rebirth mysteries that are a part of that occult knowledge. And with Arthur, you know, that he stands for Dharma, the power of duty, which brings up the virtues and the moralities. So these are two new of our heroes, helping us on our hero journey that we've not encountered before. And then we have down here, as a part of this opposition, Merlin and Arthur over here are trine Hercules retrograde and Neptune retrograde in Pisces. And so Hercules is this third hero that we're incorporating into this new Mars journey. And he is the cosmic role model. He shows us that we can call on our own inner strength, that we are worthy, that we can affect prodigious feats, and that we too can be exalted after death. And I would go so far as to say that we don't need to be exalted after death, that this, what was known in the Piscean age as exaltation after death, is really what we are experiencing here in terms of our own ascension.
Yeah.
And then look who else is here. The moon and Venus. We know from our work with the sacred feminine that then when the moon and Venus come together in the sky, she's activating, the sacred feminine is activating a gate. And we know that on this day, that the Aquarian Aries Archetype birth, that the sacred feminine activated the heart chakra. And so here's this gate, a part of this aspect, with Uranus over here on this side, trining, meaning being in a harmonious flow, blending their energies for all of this new creation to happen up here at a higher frequency. And remember what I said about the full moon being right here next to Uranus? What the sacred feminine is helping Uranus to create at that new level with Juno, Mercury, Merlin, and Arthur is going to be illuminated on October 31st. So it's too bad that Wanda's not here, because it would have been great for her to see how the sacred feminine is even being integrated in this chart for this Aries archetype.
Well, maybe she'll listen later.
Yeah. So any questions about this particular aspect and these new hero asteroids that we're adding to this unique journey that we're embarking on?
No.
Okay, thank
you.
All right. So this particular opposition on the Taurus Scorpio line is engaging the fixed element. So in this chart for this birth, we have engaged earth, water, air, and fire. We have engaged fixed, cardinal, immutable signs. I mean, just like she said, that starburst, everything in every direction is involved. All of creation is involved. All, anything that you can think of as creation, the source field is involved in this explosion, this starburst that's happening at this time. And with the fixed signs, they want to stabilize and maintain things. They're concerned with changing things so that it is back to the way it was. Well, I don't think it's ever going to go back to the way it was. I think that with those two grand crosses, that this aspect is the stabilizing force that is necessary and that the sacred feminine is contributing to, so that what is created here can be sustained and maintained. Oh, here comes Wanda. Excellent.
Good.
So the shamanic medicine of this axis for Taurus is the full embodiment and receiving the pleasure of life. Well, how is it going to be sustained and maintained if we do not embody it? From the as above, Mars and Venus, to the as within, the inner masculine, the inner feminine. We must embody this archetype. And that is how it's going to be stabilized and maintained. So the questions we can ask ourselves here is, how do I trust the instincts of my body? And am I worthy to receive pleasure in my body? Imagine how pleasurable it will be to be aligned with those archetypes, to have those archetypes within us expressing through us. As within, so without. And then the Scorpio medicine, fearlessness and vulnerability. How do I surrender to deep and profound shamanic transformation? We know from being in France, from sitting on that seat of Isis, the kind of deep and profound transformation that receiving this archetype of divine creation and receiving this Aquarian Aries archetype of the fierce protector, we know how deep and profound that transformation is. And that's what humanity is going to experience. And so, yes, it takes a fearlessness. It takes a willingness to be vulnerable and to allow it. And so the other question you can ask yourself is, how do I claim my power? All right, so I think we were just talking about the shamanic medicine for Scorpio and how we can claim our power. So we go forward. So what I'd like to do now that we've been introduced to the Mars Synodic Cycle and the Mars archetype is, I thought it would be fun to see here for the four of us that have been taking the Sacred Feminine class, to see what our Mars overtones are and compare them to our Venus overtones. So Leela's not here, so we will skip over hers. But for Wanda, your Mars overtone is in Libra. And to me, this is spectacular because if you remember in the Grand Cross, in Libra is where the sun was sekhmet, and that's where that new moon is. And that's where when Mercury goes direct, that's where that's happening as well, in Libra. And that is the other side of where this architect was birthed. So the fact that you have that Libra overtone tells me that this particular Aries archetype is going to be really, really significant for you because of the fact that the birth of it engaged those Libra energies. And what's interesting is, your Venus overtone is Cancer, the great mother, and so is Leela's. And while your Mars overtone is Libra, which is an air energy, Leela's is Gemini, also an air energy. So I find it fascinating that you both have an air and water combination between your Mars and your Venus. And the name of the archetype for you, for your Mars overtone, is the good partner. And the good partner is committed to world peace and harmony. Which is, again, no surprise that axis is activated in the birth of this Aquarian Aries archetype that is a part of that Aquarian archetype of divine creation. Had to be, couldn't be any other way. And as Maureen said earlier, the fact that the sacred feminine had already made its evolution through Aries, and now the sacred masculine is. And so I think that this speaks back to that question you asked in terms of why and what does that mean? Well, we can see he had to, in order to be able to be that equal part of the archetype of divine creation. Now, for Maureen and I, we already know that our Venus overtones are in Scorpio. We both have a Scorpio Venus overtone. But interestingly enough, we also both have a Cancer Mars overtone. The fact that we have the same Mars overtones and Venus overtones is fascinating. I mean, I don't know how many people meet other people that have the same Mars and Venus overtone as them. That's just, I'd love to know what the statistics on that are. But our Cancer overtone, Mars overtone, is known as the good provider. That's the archetype. And the good provider is committed to the welfare of others, whether it's Mother Nature, the children, the four-leggeds, meaning the animals that walk our planet, or our families. And so again, talking back to the fact that the Great Mother, who is that Cancer energy, is your guru, your cosmic guru. There's a lot that you can learn from her here. And for someone who didn't have any planets in Cancer and didn't think that Cancer was showing up in your chart, in her iniquitous way that water does, right? It always finds some creek or crack or crevice to flow through. That Cancer energy is showing up for you. So how do you guys feel about knowing about your Mars overtones? Any remarks that you have to say about the archetypes of your Mars overtone? Yes, no?
Once I found out, that was pretty amazing to me because, you know, it stands to reason because I didn't care about where my Mars was, that I sure as heck wouldn't care where the overtone was. So these, so I'm going to, you know, I've definitely, you know, have a relationship to my Mars, but now to realize how that Cancer energy informs it, you know, that's interesting because I've never felt comfortable in Cancer energy, whether it's the sun when it moves into the sun, Cancer, sun moves into Cancer, or any energies, you know, of the moon or whatever are in Cancer. I don't relate.
But do you think that you have an opening now for being able to consciously choose to find a relational aspect with it?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, very much so. So, and that's good. You know, I wasn't happy about not feeling good with Cancer energy. But now I can see that it does inform me. It does have some bearing on how I see things, how I perceive things.
Well, and from, you know, what I know of you, I can see it absolutely informs how you do things.
Okay. Now, Cancer is considered in service to others, or is in service to spirit. You know how there's 3 levels of each sign. The water sign, Scorpio is in service to self. Libra, or no, Scorpio.
Well, let me interrupt you here because I think I know where you're going. So when you're talking about the water signs, and the way I always approach each of the elemental signs is you have your foundational frequency, which is Cancer. Then at a high frequency, you have the Scorpio. And then at the highest expression, The
It's
highest
Pisces.
frequency, the Pisces.
Okay. So then Cancer is the first level of water, then Scorpio, and then Pisces.
And
Okay.
remember what Cancer does. Cancer creates safe space. So when you're diving into those emotions, how can you dive deep, really deep, if you're not in a safe space? So you need that foundation from Cancer
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
able to engage those Scorpio energies.
Yeah. Well, I must have been engaging it then anyway. I wouldn't know if I didn't know it because I've sure as heck engaged Scorpio.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I must have felt something akin in Cancer.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wanda, I'd love to hear from you about any insights, revelations, questions, musings that you have about your Libra Mars overtone.
Yes, thank you. I would like to know, it says I'm committed to world peace and harmony, and how in the world can I commit to something like that when I'm feeling completely opposite inside?
Good question. It's a really good question. Were you here when we went over the emotional guidance scale?
No, I think I needed to leave for a little while.
Mhm. Okay. So, and I'm going to send you a recording on that in terms of the emotional guidance scale. And so it's something that you have to consciously choose to work with, but to choose to work with it, you have to be okay with where you are, wherever you are. If you're in despair, if you're in anger, if you're in resentment, frustration, confusion, wherever you are is okay, because that is what is allowing you to be able to realize where you'd like to be, what you'd like to create. It's giving you the opening for doing that. But to be able to do that, you have to make peace with it. We have a tendency to judge ourselves when we're not feeling well, or when we're not feeling how we think we should be, or what others think we should be. And so wherever you are, for as long as it lasts, it's okay. And it is serving you. If you can know and trust that no matter how imperceptible it is serving your expansion, and it is serving what you are going to create later that will be even greater than.
Okay,
Got to make peace with it and be okay with it.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other remarks regarding our overtones? Okay. So where are we? Vision quest opportunities. Remember when we talked about vision questing? When in our sacred feminine class, when people were like, I don't want homework. We said, let's call them vision quest opportunities. So, you can do none of them. You can do all of them. You can do one or two of them. Just remember, the more you invest in this process, the more you get out of it. And if you're not ready to invest, be at peace with that and be okay with that too. Okay. So here are the opportunities. You can choose one of our asteroid heroes, Hercules, Arthur, and Merlin, to dive into. And for Wanda, because she wasn't here when we went over the aspects that engaged those three, there is information, some preliminary information about the influences of each of those for us. You can just dive into them by discovering the significant themes of their journeys, and then try to receive some Aquarian archetype keywords from your inner guidance that resonate at a higher frequency, just like we did with the Piscean Aries archetype to the Aquarian Aries archetype. And then share those at our group session that we have so that we can incorporate those Aquarian archetype keywords into our Mars journey. You can also, which this kind of is on the back of me sharing some of those phrases from Marcia Wade's Star Sister Astrology, Find some articles about Mars and Aries by some other astrologers and read their content and pull out words and phrases that resonate to you, that remind you of this represents Mars energy, this represents Aries energy. And then once you have those phrases, contemplate on those phrases and see if you can receive a keyword, an Aquarian archetype keyword that's from your inner guidance that's at a higher frequency. And if you're not really sure what I'm talking about here, Wanda, you may remember a while back, we were talking about the words nurture and nourish, and how while some people use those two words interchangeably, when you really feel into the word nurture and nourish, they're different frequencies. So that's what I'm talking about. Kind of like before when we were using the thesaurus to find other words that resonated more keenly, that aligned more with what we were trying to express in terms of the frequencies. So then share those with us at the group sessions so we can incorporate them too. And then choose a heroic story that appeals to you, whether it's one of those stories that he talked about in that little video, or if it's something like Maureen and I experienced over the past year with our trip to France. Pick a story, a historic story that appeals to you, and discern the stages of the hero's journey, kind of like what we were doing earlier when we were on that phase of the webinar. And then share that with us in the group sessions so that we can clarify our understanding and insight into the stages. And if you don't do any of these, if you at least do this last one, in order to get through this Mars Synodic cycle, this Aries journey with Mars, we've got to be able to have a clear understanding and insight into these stages. We're learning this. This is all new for us. So this last one will kind of help make that a little bit more concrete for you in your mind. Any questions about these Vision Quest opportunities? Just want to bring your attention to this link that'll be on the resource page. This is a fabulous article on what vision questing is from various perspectives, and I think it's a really good support resource for how you can prepare yourself to dive into these opportunities. All right, so we're at the question and answer session. I mean, we've been through a lot, and I applaud you both for sticking with me through this. I never anticipated it would take this long to get through it, but as we've discussed, for this first class to be the foundation for this next 26 months, I think it was necessary. And I really am so appreciative of you sticking with me through this and engaging all of it with me. Any questions about anything at this point?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No.
All right, so for anybody else who might be listening to this at a later date, we just want to do a little commercial here. My website for the Golden Ray Center is goldenraycenter.com. You can visit this website on the Mystery School tab to subscribe to these monthly classes, the Sacred Feminine journey that follows the Venus Synodic cycle and the Sacred Masculine journey that follows the Mars Synodic cycle. It is a monthly subscription, so you can join us at any time and you can leave us at any time. Or if you're interested in both, you can do the Twin Flame journey. And so the fees are here, the subscription prices are here, $108 a month for each one individually, or if you're going to do both, $180 a month, that gives you a $36 savings. And in addition to this group class that we do together, you get a private session, 2 hours private session to take everything that we've talked about in this class and bring it down to look at your personal solar return chart and make it very personal to you in terms of how you as a unique individual are being influenced and expanded by all of the information we've discussed. So any final words that anybody would like to share about your experiences so far with the Sacred Feminine journey?
No.
Okay, well, thank you, ladies, you guys, for being with me today. It's been truly an honor to explore this with you. I'm very excited. I can't even find a different word to say. The potentiality of what may unfold from this is mind-blowing for me.
Yeah.
So that's why I have such eager anticipation about seeing how this journey unfolds.
I do too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, my dears, thank you very much.
Hmm.
I will see you next month for the next step on this heroic journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I look forward to discovering this with you.
Wonderful.
Okay.
And just for the sake of confirming the Venus class, it's Monday at 5 your time and 2 Pacific.
Right.
Okay.
5 p.m. Eastern,
Mm-hmm.
Monday, the 26th, October
It's
26th,
the 26th. Yeah, 26th.
and 2 p.m.
Okay.
Pacific time. Yep.
Okay, good.
Thanks,
Got it.
love. See ya.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
Wanda. Thanks for being with us, Wanda.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Keep losing my stop recording button. That's why I keep saying goodbye. Oh, goodness. I can't seem to grab it with my mouse. Hold on a second here. Let me pull it down. Maybe that'll help. There we go. Bye-bye, love.
There. Bye.